My name is Liam. I'm 29, and for the past few years, my birthdays have been complicated. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just complicated in that quiet, aching way that leaves you staring at your phone a little too long, trying to make sense of a text that shouldn't hurt but somehow does. My family, my parents, my older brother Ryan, and my younger sister Clara have this unspoken hierarchy, and I've always felt like I was somewhere near the bottom of it. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't fit the mold. I wasn't loud like Ryan, who commands every room he walks into. I wasn't soft and agreeable like Clara, the family's golden girl. I was just me. I didn't cause problems, but I didn't play along either. And in my family, not playing along is its own kind of rebellion. This year, I decided to take the lead and plan my own birthday dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a reservation at my favorite little Italian place near the river, a group chat invite to the whole family 2 weeks in advance, and a reminder the day before. Simple, right? I even made sure the time wouldn't conflict with anyone's work schedule. I picked 7 p.m. on a Friday night, thinking we could all relax, laugh, and share a meal like a normal family. I told my mom about it directly too, just to make sure. She'd sounded neutral. Not excited, not dismissive, just that flat, "we'll see," tone she uses when she's already made a decision in her head but doesn't want to say it out loud. So there I was on my birthday, dressed in the blue button-up my ex used to say made my eyes look darker, sitting at a corner table next to the window. I had the waiter hold off on putting in orders until the rest of the party arrived. I kept checking the time, watching the sun sink lower behind the buildings, telling myself they were just running late. Maybe traffic. Maybe they forgot the address and were circling the block. I kept refreshing the group chat, thinking maybe someone had messaged while I wasn't looking. Nothing. By 7:30, I started to feel the first familiar pang of embarrassment rise in my chest, but I waved it off. People were busy. It was Friday. Surely someone was on their way. By 8, I'd gone through 2 refills of water and made enough awkward eye contact with the waiter that I could feel his second-hand discomfort from across the room. I smiled at him weakly and said, "Just a few more minutes, I think." He gave me that polite, pitying nod, the kind that says, "You poor thing," without a word. By 8:20, I caved. I opened the group chat and typed, "Hey, are you guys still coming?" Ryan replied almost instantly, which somehow stung more than if it had been silence. "We did brunch without you. You always make these things about yourself." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Not even a happy birthday. Just a blunt dismissal wrapped in that usual tone of moral superiority he always wielded like a shield. I stared at that message for a full minute, rereading it over and over. I could practically hear his voice saying it casual, smug, as if he'd done me a favor. And the worst part was, it wasn't just him. I saw that the message was liked by Clara. Even my mom had reacted to it with a heart emoji earlier. That one tore through me. I didn't reply. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg for an explanation or send a guilt-ridden paragraph about how I'd been waiting alone for almost 2 hours. Instead, I asked the waiter if he could pack the tiramisu to go, thanked him for checking on me, and left the restaurant. I walked 2 blocks in the cool night air, my fingers numb around the little cardboard dessert box, until I passed the cozy glow of a downtown pub where a few of my coworkers were finishing up a Friday happy hour. I don't usually join them, but something inside me snapped into place. I pushed the door open. "Liam," said Sarah from HR, her eyes lighting up. "You should have come earlier." "Wait, it's your birthday, right?" I nodded, half smiling. 10 minutes later, I had a slice of barmaid cake in front of me, a balloon someone tied to my chair, and a chorus of happy birthday sung with slightly tipsy joy. I posted a photo of it, cake, balloons, and my coworkers holding up peace signs and beer glasses. The caption was simple, "Best birthday ever." I didn't expect much. I didn't even post it with pettiness in mind, just a quiet declaration that I wasn't going to let them ruin it for me. But that post? It blew up in the family group chat. I didn't notice at first, but when I finally checked my phone around midnight, I had a dozen missed calls. My mom had left 3 voicemails. The last one I played out of curiosity. She was screaming, "How dare you embarrass us like that? People will think we abandoned you. What will your aunt say when she sees that photo? And your cousin Mallory shared it on her story. Do you want to humiliate the family?" That's when I knew. It wasn't about me being hurt. It wasn't about missing my birthday dinner or leaving me alone in that restaurant. It was about image, control, how they looked. Me being happy without them was apparently more offensive than them ignoring me altogether. The next morning, I woke up to a passive-aggressive message from Clara. Next time, don't try to make us look bad just because you didn't get your way. Ryan followed up with, grow up, Liam. It's always something with you. And my mom said, your father is very disappointed. He said you owe us an apology. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I wasn't aching for their validation. But the next move I made? That one made sure they'd never treat me like an afterthought again. I didn't answer any of their texts that day, or the day after. I muted the group chat and silenced the calls. Not out of spite, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a sliver of satisfaction, but because I needed space. Real, uninterrupted, guilt-free space. And something strange happened in that silence. I started to breathe easier. The next Monday, I went into work early, stopped by the corner cafe for a proper cappuccino, and took my usual seat near the window on the 10th floor of the office. My manager, Eric, passed by and tapped on the frame. Heard you had a good birthday, he said, grinning. I nodded. Surprisingly, yeah. He paused. You ever think about applying for the open team lead role? I've seen the way people gravitate to you. It caught me off guard. I'd been quietly doing my job for years, efficient, reliable, but never flashy. I'd always told myself I wasn't that kind of guy. Not the take charge, command the room type. That was Ryan. I was background, quietly capable, but maybe that had more to do with how my family treated me than who I actually was. So I said yes. I submitted the application that afternoon. That week, while waiting to hear back, I took a deep dive into cleaning out my life. I went through old messages, deleted threads that only brought up feelings of obligation or old wounds. I unsubscribed from family group chats, turned off birthday notifications for relatives who never texted back, and finally, sat down to write something I should have written years ago, a letter to myself. Not a journal entry, not a therapy exercise, just a promise that I wouldn't beg anymore, that I wouldn't show up out of guilt or keep giving people pieces of myself just because they carried the title of family. But of course, silence from me only made them louder. 3 days after the birthday post, Clara sent me a photo of my niece holding a drawing with the words, I miss Uncle Liam, in crayon. Then, she was asking why you're ignoring us. But go ahead and keep playing the victim, I guess. The audacity of using a child as a pawn to make me feel guilty was not new, but this time, it didn't work. Instead, it reminded me of every time they'd used birthdays, holidays, even funerals as a way to exert power. Liam, can you just be the bigger person? Don't ruin it for everyone. Just show up and be quiet. Not anymore. I ignored the message. And a few days later, a text from Mom came in. Sunday, 3 p.m. family meeting. At our house. We need to fix this. That was her idea of an olive branch. A mandatory meeting at their house. No apology. No effort to come to me, meet halfway, or acknowledge what they'd done. I stared at that message for a while. And this time, I didn't stay silent. There's nothing to fix. I've spent years trying to be enough for you all, and I finally realized I don't need to prove anything anymore. You made your choice when you skipped my birthday, when you called me selfish for celebrating without you, and when you tried to make me the villain because I wouldn't lie for your image. You want a meeting? Fine, but we're doing it on my terms. I expected another outburst, but this time it was radio silence. Not even a read receipt. Then, 2 days later, Ryan called me. Not a text. A full-blown call. I stared at the screen as it rang, then let it go to voicemail. He left a message. Look, man. Mom's upset. Dad's not sleeping. They think you've cut everyone off. Clara said you're being manipulative, making us all look bad online. I told them I'd try to talk to you. So, consider this me trying. But whatever this stunt is, it's not gonna fix anything. He hung up. No apology. Just another reminder that even their attempts at reconciliation came wrapped in condescension. That's when I knew it was time to set the boundary in a way they'd have to notice. A few weeks prior, my parents had been nagging me about helping with Clara's wedding fund. Apparently, the photographer she wanted was too talented to pass up, but also a little out of budget. They'd hinted, not so subtly, that I could chip in since you don't have kids or a partner, and you make good money. Back then, I've been hesitant. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I thought helping might finally earn me a spot at the table. But now I had a different idea. So, I wrote an email. Subject: wedding contribution. Hi Mom, Dad. I've given this a lot of thought, and I wanted to be clear. I won't be contributing to Clara's wedding. Not financially, not logistically, not emotionally. I wish her the best, and I hope her day is everything she wants it to be. I won't be attending either. That may seem harsh, but given how you all treated me on my birthday and the aftermath of me simply celebrating with friends, I think it's the healthiest choice for me. You don't have to agree with my decision, but I need you to respect it. I won't continue showing up for people who don't show up for me. Take care, Liam. I hit send and closed the laptop. That night, I went to dinner with friends, people who laughed at my jokes, asked me how work was going, and didn't expect anything in return except kindness and presence. People who made space for me without needing me to shrink. And as I walked home, I saw I had one new message from my mom. It read, "You've made your point. We'll talk at the wedding." That was the moment I realized she still didn't get it. And so, I made a decision that would ensure she'd never misunderstand again. The next few days, I didn't respond. I didn't even open the message. My silence was no longer a cry for attention, it was my boundary. One they weren't used to. In the past, I'd cave. Always. I'd send long texts trying to explain how I felt, trying to be understood by people who had no interest in understanding me unless it fit their narrative. But not this time. This time, I was done playing the role of the too sensitive one or the emotional liability. I wasn't going to fight for scraps of empathy anymore. Still, I knew them. I knew they wouldn't let it rest. And I was right. Clara called me the next evening. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won out. Her voice was chipper at first, like nothing had happened. "Hey, so I just finished my cake tasting today. Oh my God, Liam, red velvet with salted caramel? You have to try it." I stayed quiet, waiting. She went on, undeterred. "Anyway, you know the RSVP link? I didn't see yours. Figured it was just an oversight." "It wasn't," I said calmly. She paused, and I could practically hear the gears turning. "Wait, you're not coming?" "No," she let out a soft, incredulous laugh, like I was a child refusing to eat vegetables. "Okay, come on. I get that you're still sore about your birthday, but this is my wedding." "I know. That's why I'm telling you directly. I'm not coming." Her tone changed instantly. "So you're seriously going to throw a tantrum and bail? After everything our family's done for you?" I almost laughed. The mental gymnastics would have won gold. "What has the family done for me, Clara? Really? Because as far as I remember, you all went to brunch on my birthday, called me selfish for being upset, then tried to guilt me when I posted one happy photo." She was quiet for a beat, then snapped. "That post was petty, and you know it. You humiliated Mom." "No," I said, voice steady. "Mom humiliated herself when she reacted to it like that instead of realizing how hurt I was. She was more concerned about what it looked like than what it meant. You're unbelievable. And you're entitled." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, staring out the window at the darkened skyline. A strange sense of calm came over me. It wasn't easy. It never is when you step out of a role you've been cast in since childhood. But the silence now felt like peace, not punishment. The next day, the retaliation came. My aunt called, Mom's older sister, the family's unofficial spokeswoman for all things respect and tradition. She left a voicemail, voice dripping with that artificial concern reserved for people they're about to manipulate. "Liam, honey, it's Aunt Marla. I heard you're not coming to the wedding, and well, it's not my place, but your mother is devastated. Absolutely devastated. She's been crying for days. Clara's heartbroken. Your brother thinks you've completely lost it. And the neighbors are asking questions. Please, whatever this is, just come. Even if it's just for the ceremony. Don't make this a permanent mistake." I listened to the entire thing, then deleted it without replying. The problem wasn't that they didn't understand what they did. It was that they didn't care. Not unless it made them look bad. 2 days later, my mom finally showed up at my apartment. Unannounced. I only opened the door because she kept knocking. And knocking. And knocking. She was dressed to the nines, as if the right outfit could will the situation into something manageable. "We need to talk," she said flatly. I leaned against the frame. "You could have called. You wouldn't answer. That should have told you something." She crossed her arms. "This is getting out of hand, Liam. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you're acting like a stranger." "No," I said. "I'm acting like someone who's finally done being treated like an afterthought." Her eyes narrowed. "We didn't forget your birthday. We just didn't think a big dinner was necessary. We'd already celebrated at brunch. You didn't invite me to the brunch," I reminded her. "We assumed you'd be busy." I blinked. "You assumed I'd be busy on my own birthday? The one I planned 2 weeks ahead? The one you confirmed you'd come to?" She waved it off. "Oh, don't twist things." "I'm not twisting anything. You just don't like being held accountable." Her face reddened. "This is about more than just a dinner. This is about the way you've turned your back on this family. You're punishing us." "No," I said firmly. "I'm protecting myself." We stood there in silence. Finally, she said the one thing I was waiting for. "You're choosing outsiders over your own family." I smiled, just a little. Funny. That's what it finally took to feel like I belonged somewhere. She stared at me like I just slapped her. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. She left without saying goodbye. That night, I got an email from Ryan. Short. To the point. "You've made your bed. Don't expect us to be there when you realize how cold it is." I read it. I didn't reply. But I did forward it to HR the next morning, along with my acceptance of the team lead position and my notice that I'd be using a few vacation days before stepping into the new role. Because while they were busy playing damage control for a wedding I wouldn't attend, I had a plan of my own unfolding, one they didn't see coming. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for my new role at work, brushing up on leadership strategies, and shadowing my manager, Eric, during meetings. It was refreshing to focus on something that didn't revolve around guilt or emotional manipulation. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something on my own terms, earning respect not because I was the peacemaker or the easy one to blame, but because I showed up, I worked hard, and I supported people who did the same. Meanwhile, the family group chat continued without me. Or maybe it didn't. I'd left it for good, and the silence was the most peaceful thing I'd ever known. Then came the wedding week. My absence had clearly become the elephant in the room. People started messaging me individually, distant cousins, old family friends, even Claire's maid of honor. Some messages were subtle guilt trips. "You don't have to talk to anyone. Just come for the ceremony." Others were more direct. "Your mom looks awful, Liam. You could fix this if you just showed up." And one message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years just said, "Whatever they did to you, it must have been bad." I get it now. That one stuck with me. Clara's wedding was on a Saturday. That morning, I woke up at 8 a.m. to the sound of rain tapping lightly against my window. I made coffee. I sat by the window. I scrolled through the early morning posts from acquaintances dressed in formal wear, captioned "Wedding Day Vibes." I smiled and closed the app. By 10 a.m., I had another missed call from my mom. Then one from Dad. Then Ryan. And then, the final push, Clara herself. She left a voicemail. I almost didn't listen, but something told me I should hear it. Her voice was calm. Unusually calm. "Hey, I know you're not coming. I guess I finally believe it. I won't try to change your mind. But I just wanted to say, I didn't realize how much we'd made you feel like you didn't matter. I still don't understand everything, but I see that you were hurt. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." There was a pause. "Anyway, I hope you find people who do show up, who make you feel like you matter. Maybe we weren't those people. I'm sorry for that, too." She hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there with a strange ache in my chest, the ache of being seen too late. I didn't reply. Instead, I went through with the plan I'd quietly been organizing over the past month. A friend of mine, Jules, someone I'd known since college, was running a community mentorship program for young adults who aged out of the foster system. They needed help building resumes, preparing for job interviews, and navigating their first workplaces. She'd once mentioned how powerful it would be to have someone from a corporate environment come in regularly, not just for a motivational talk, but for practical mentoring. So I showed up that day. I walked into a room full of nervous 20-somethings. Some barely made eye contact. Some smiled shyly. I introduced myself and talked about job applications, how to handle interviews, how to write a cover letter that actually gets read. And then I told them something I'd never said out loud before. I used to think I had to earn love. That if I did enough, was helpful enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually people would treat me like I mattered. But love that has to be bought isn't love. It's control. There was silence. A stillness. And then a few nods. Someone raised their hand to ask a question. And just like that, I'd found something more real than anything I'd ever gotten from my family. That evening, while Clara and the others were probably slow dancing under chandeliers and posting perfectly filtered wedding photos, I sat in my apartment with tiramisu from that same Italian place I'd been left at weeks earlier. This time, I ate it alone, but not lonely. I wasn't grieving the people I'd lost. I was freeing myself from the ones who were never really there to begin with. 2 days after the wedding, I got an email from my dad. It wasn't long, just a few clipped lines. "Your absence was noted. You embarrassed your mother. If you ever want a relationship with this family again, It's on you to repair the damage." I didn't reply, but I did forward it to Jules with a simple note. More proof that family isn't always who shares your name. Sometimes it's who shows up for you, even when they don't have to. A few weeks later, I got a message from Clara again. This time, it was different. There was no manipulation, no performance. Just this. "Liam, I know I hurt you. I know we all did. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted to say, I hope you're okay. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond right away. I let it sit. I wasn't ready to dive back into anything, not with someone who had stood by and watched me be pushed aside. But I bookmarked the message in my mind, not as a door reopening, but as a possible window. Months passed. I flourished in my new role. The mentorship program grew. I became the kind of person who got invited to dinner not out of obligation, but because people wanted me there. And when my birthday rolled around again, something strange happened. My coworkers planned a surprise lunch. The Mints made a huge handmade card with personal notes, and I received a small, square envelope in the mail. It was from Clara. Inside was a photo of us as kids, sitting on the back porch eating popsicles. She had scrawled a message on the back. "You were always the quiet one. I wish we'd listened closer. Happy birthday, Liam. I hope this year brings you everything you deserve." That night, as I blew out the candle on my cake, surrounded by people who had chosen me not out of obligation or bloodlines, but out of genuine connection, I made a promise. No more shrinking. No more explaining. No more begging to belong. From now on, I build my own table and only invite people who brought more than just expectations. And I haven't looked back since. It's weird how some things stick with you forever, like the smell of chlorine on a summer day or the hollow feeling of your parents forgetting your birthday. My name's Jake. I'm 27 now, but when I think back to the moment I realized I didn't really exist in my own family, I was 12. It was the morning of my birthday, a Saturday, and I came downstairs expecting maybe pancakes, maybe one of those corny balloons my mom would tie to the back of the kitchen chair when I was younger. But there was nothing, not even a happy birthday from either of them. They were too busy getting my older brother, Ryan, ready for his tennis match. He was 17 then, full of swagger, wearing his varsity jacket like a king wears a crown, and talking nonstop about some regional qualifier he was sure he'd win. My dad was zipping up Ryan's gear bag like it was a briefcase filled with gold. My mom handed him a protein bar and kissed him on the forehead. I stood there in the hallway, waiting, watching. Eventually, I said it out loud. "Hey, it's my birthday." My mom paused for a second. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, sweetie," she mumbled, not even looking up from tying Ryan's shoes. Something, by the way, he was fully capable of doing himself. My dad didn't say anything. He just said, "Come on, let's beat traffic," and they left. That morning, I ate cereal by myself and watched the balloons in the neighbor's yard, probably for their kid's party, sway in the wind. That's how it always was with Ryan. Everything revolved around him. If he had a soccer game, we all went. If he had a tantrum, the world stopped. If I got an A, it was well done. If he got a B+, it was a full-on celebration. They poured money into him, private tutors, sports coaches, music lessons, even a dang public speaking coach when he decided he might run for student council. I was the tag-along, the afterthought. If Ryan was a first draft being constantly edited and polished, I was the scribble in the margins. By high school, it was clear how lopsided things were. Ryan got a $30,000 Jeep for his 18th birthday. Brand new, silver, with custom leather seats and a bow on top. My dad handed him the keys in the driveway like it was a scene from a commercial. Everyone clapped. I was 16. I didn't even have a bike that fit me anymore. My old one, a rusty, hand-me-down BMX, had a broken brake and a chain that slipped every few feet. My dad once said I didn't need a new one because I wasn't really the outdoor type. But the real kicker? When Ryan turned 20, my dad gave him a job, just like that. "Come work with me," he said. "Start learning the ropes." My dad owned a mid-sized construction supply company, not flashy, but steady. He'd built it from scratch, and he was always talking about legacy and the future of the business. Apparently, that only meant Ryan. Never once did he ask if I was interested. I was already working part-time at a bookstore after school, saving up for community college. I remember overhearing him tell my uncle at a family gathering that I wasn't business-minded and that I liked to keep to myself. Like being quiet disqualified me from ever being part of the family plan. I kept my head down, studied hard, learned how to code, Built websites on an old laptop I'd bought off Craigslist with my own savings. I didn't expect praise. I didn't even really want it anymore. I just wanted freedom. Still, every once in a while, the little digs would slip in. My mom once said I looked scruffy when I showed up to a family dinner after pulling an all-nighter freelancing. My dad laughed and said, "Well, not all of us are born with hustle like Ryan." It was like I could never be enough. Not loud enough, not charismatic enough, not worthy enough. I moved out at 20 and never asked for a dime. Ryan, on the other hand, still lived at home well into his 20s. Rent-free, utilities paid, and with a revolving door of girlfriends who always seemed vaguely annoyed to be at family dinners. He'd roll his eyes when our aunts asked what he was doing these days. "Just helping Dad run the show," he'd say, like he was the heir to an empire. Meanwhile, I was taking online classes, building apps at night, and turning small freelance gigs into something real, something mine. They didn't know that, though. No one in my family really asked. They assumed I was scraping by, probably still working at that bookstore. It was easier that way. Let them think I was average. Let Ryan think he'd won. But something shifted a few months ago. It was my aunt, Dad's younger sister, who noticed. She invited me over for coffee one Sunday, just the two of us, and said, "Jake, you look good." Like, good. What's going on? I don't know why, but I told her. I told her about the app that took off. About the buyout offer I accepted that left me with more money than I'd ever imagined. I told her I'd quietly invested in a few rental properties, started 2 more ventures, and was technically a millionaire now. Not that I was flaunting it. She blinked, stunned. "Does your family know?" I shook my head. They never asked. And I wasn't planning on telling them, either. Not until the family barbecue. It was one of those long-standing traditions. Every summer, my parents would host a massive cookout in the backyard. All the aunts and uncles, cousins, distant relatives. Ryan was always the star of the show, walking around with a beer in hand, cracking jokes, talking loudly about business deals he didn't understand, or how he and Dad were crushing it at work. I usually stood by the grill or helped the kids with their games. Out of the spotlight. As usual. But this time, things were different. This time, I didn't arrive in my usual beat-up sedan. I'd given it away months ago. I showed up in a sleek black Audi, understated but clean. And I wore a simple but tailored outfit. Nothing flashy, but expensive if you knew what to look for. I brought a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. And I watched, amused, as heads turned. Ryan's eyes narrowed the moment he saw me. I saw his jaw clench. But he said nothing. Not right away. People started asking questions. "Where have you been, Jake? You look great. What are you up to these days?" And I gave vague answers. "Just working. Keeping busy." I saw Ryan watching me like a hawk, probably trying to figure out why his little brother was suddenly the center of attention. Then someone, I think it was my cousin Julia, asked directly, "So what do you do, Jake?" "Like, for work." I smiled. Took a sip of wine. "Tech stuff," I said. "I sold a couple of apps. Invested a bit. Nothing huge." Ryan laughed, loud and fake. "Yeah, sure. Jake's the next Zuckerberg." I shrugged. "Nah, I just play it smart." Quietly. That word, quietly, did something to him. I saw the flicker in his eyes. Like he knew I was saying something more. He didn't blow up right then. Not yet. But the stage was set. What happened next would tear the family wide open. And it all started with a single, innocent question from my aunt, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, Jake, are you planning to take over Dad's company someday?" I didn't even get the chance to answer. Ryan did. And that's when the mask came off. Ryan didn't even let the question breathe. "Why would Jake take over the company?" he scoffed, practically laughing as he stood up a little straighter, his beer sloshing slightly in his hand. "He's never lifted a finger for it. I've been working with Dad for years. I know the clients. I know the vendors. Jake's just doing whatever it is he does online." There was a beat of silence. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, eyes steady, lips neutral. But inside, something cracked. Not snapped. Not exploded. Just cracked. Like the slow, inevitable split in a frozen windshield. You know it's coming. You see it spreading. And no matter what you do, it's never going back to what it was. My aunt, the one who'd asked the question, blinked. She glanced between us and said, "I just thought. Maybe Jake had been doing something worth talking about too." "Oh, I'm sure he's busy," Ryan added with a forced chuckle. "But let's be real. Jake's never been the business type. You said it yourself, Dad. My dad, who'd been manning the grill like some king at his post, turned slightly. Ryan's been a real asset, he said. He stepped up. He's responsible. There it was again. The invisibility cloak, thrown over me with such casual ease. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. I didn't plan on speaking. I didn't come to that barbecue to stir the pot. But there's only so many times you can be erased from your own story before your voice finds its way out. I've been busy building something too, I said calmly. It just didn't involve asking Dad for a job. A few heads turned. The cousins nearby stopped poking at the chips and salsa. Ryan snorted. You mean like your little side projects? No, I said. Like the startup I sold last year. The one that paid for my condo. And my car. And a couple other things. My mom's head jerked up. You bought a condo? I nodded. Downtown. Paid in full. Ryan's smirk faltered, just slightly. Wait, you actually made money off one of those apps? More than a little, I replied, keeping my tone light. I don't really talk about it much. Wasn't really the kind of thing anyone seemed curious about. My dad gave a polite, confused laugh, like he wasn't sure if this was a joke. You're telling me you bought property? With what? Freelance money. That was the first sting. Not the question itself, but the complete disbelief in his voice. As if I were a child claiming I'd built a spaceship in the backyard. I didn't freelance, I said. I built and sold a software tool that helped small e-commerce shops automate inventory tracking. One of the big retail back-end firms bought it. Then I started a SaaS platform. Now I have 2 small teams and passive income from 3 properties. Ryan's smirk was gone now. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're kidding, he said flatly. Since when? A while now, I replied. There was a long silence. People were looking around. My cousin whispered something to her boyfriend. My aunt, the same one who'd asked, was beaming, clearly enjoying the shift in power. But it wasn't just pride. It was something else. Something calculating. That's when she said it. Loudly. Clearly. Well, if your dad were fair, he'd offer you a stake in the company, Jake. You're the only one who actually built something from scratch. The backyard might as well have frozen over. My dad blinked. My mom looked stunned. Ryan. Ryan turned a deep shade of red. You think I don't work hard? He snapped at her. She raised a brow. You do what your dad tells you. That's not the same thing. My dad stepped in fast, trying to lighten the mood. Okay, let's not turn this into a debate. It's a family party. But the damage was done. Ryan couldn't let it go. Not after that. Not after losing the spotlight in his own kingdom. For the rest of the barbecue, he hovered. Asked weird questions. What kind of car did you say you got again? How much did that wine cost? So, you actually own a company now? He was digging, trying to find cracks, trying to find some way to downplay it. I stayed calm. Polite. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. That, more than anything, probably drove him crazy. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and the backyard was quieter, I went inside to grab something from the kitchen. That's when I overheard them. Ryan and my parents. In the dining room. He embarrassed me, Ryan was saying. At my house. It's not your house, my mom whispered, but weakly. My dad added, we didn't know he'd made money. He's never mentioned it before. Because he's sneaky, Ryan snapped. You think he just happened to show up in that car with that watch and that smug face? He wanted this. He planned this. He wanted to make me look like some trust fund idiot. I froze in the hallway. Part of me wanted to walk in and set the record straight. But another part wanted to hear what they really thought. You're overreacting, my mom said, though again, there was no conviction behind it. I've been here, working, helping Dad with everything. And now suddenly Jake's the golden child because he made a few bucks online. Ryan, my dad began, but Ryan cut him off. No way. You promised me. I've earned this. The business is mine. He doesn't get to just waltz in and take that from me. Take that from me. Like I was stealing something that was never even offered. I slipped away before they noticed me, heart pounding. Not from fear. Not from sadness. From clarity. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was about Ryan feeling entitled to a legacy that didn't even exist yet. A future he assumed would be handed to him, just like everything else in his life. And I was a threat. A mirror. One that showed him everything he wasn't. A week passed. Then 2. Radio silence from my parents. No calls. No texts. Just quiet tension humming underneath everything. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from my cousin Julia. Hey, she said, hesitant. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, But Ryan, he went to your dad and asked him to freeze you out of the will. I blinked. Wait, what? Yeah. He told your dad you were manipulating everyone, that you only showed up to the barbecue to make a scene and steal attention. And he suggested that if something happened to your parents, you'd probably sell the business to the Chinese or something ridiculous like that. I sat in stunned silence. That's not all, she said. I overheard him talking to your mom too. He told her that if they didn't protect him legally, he'd walk. Said he didn't want to waste another 5 years just to have you come in and inherit half the company. It didn't even feel real. The same guy who used to give me noogies and steal my Halloween candy was now lobbying to erase me from the family, all because I dared to succeed on my own. I thanked Julia, hung up, stared at the wall. That was the moment it changed. All of it. I'd tolerated the jabs, the years of invisibility, the backhanded compliments, the favoritism. I'd swallowed every birthday they forgot, every achievement they dismissed, every time they looked past me in favor of their loud, flashy golden boy. But trying to legally erase me? That was a line. And I don't care how dramatic this sounds. Something in me snapped. Not with rage. Not with violence. With purpose. I wasn't going to fight him with words. Or threats. Or drama. No, I was going to do it the same way I'd built everything else in my life. Quietly. Strategically. But I wouldn't be the only one revealing secrets. Because Julia wasn't the only one who'd heard things. My aunt, the one who'd asked the question at the barbecue, had a secret of her own, and she'd been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. All she needed was a spark, and Ryan had just lit the match. I don't know what I expected after that phone call from Julia. Maybe a confrontation. Maybe some kind of denial from my parents. A half-hearted apology. Something. Instead, I got silence. Not the kind that heals. The kind that confirms everything you feared. I waited 3 days before calling my mom. She picked up on the third ring, her voice a little too bright. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, I said. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't want small talk. So, I heard some things, I began. About Ryan. About the will. There was a pause, then the sound of her exhale. Jake, we didn't want to upset you. Did you change it? Another pause. A longer one. Your father and I have been talking. Ryan's worked very hard at the company. You've made your own way, and we're so proud of you. But the business, it's always been the plan for him. I felt it in my chest. Not a punch. Not a stab. Just that quiet, dull ache that seeps in when a truth you hoped might not be real gets confirmed. I never asked for the business, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I never asked for anything, actually. I know, she said softly. You've always been independent. You don't need anything. That was it. That was their logic. I didn't need anything. So I got nothing. Ryan needed, so he got it all. Even when he didn't actually earn it. He needed affirmation, attention, money, space. I needed none of those things, apparently. I just existed to clap from the sidelines. I hung up before the conversation could veer into more rationalizations. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was just numb. But the numbness didn't last long. That weekend, I went for a walk. I didn't even know where I was headed. I just started moving. Past rows of brick apartment buildings, little corner cafes, old oak trees shedding their leaves in the wind. I ended up at a park, the kind with peeling paint on the benches and an old jungle gym that probably hadn't been replaced since the early 2000s. I sat there, hands in my coat pockets, and watched a kid try to climb the monkey bars while his mom stood nearby, cheering him on. He slipped twice, then made it on the third try. She clapped, he grinned, and something in my chest twisted. No one ever clapped for me. But I clapped for myself. Quietly. In the dark. When I closed my first freelance contract. When I sold my app. When I got the email that the wire transfer had gone through. Every milestone, every win, it was just me. And that's when I realized something that changed everything. I'd been waiting for a family that wasn't coming. Waiting for validation from people who'd already made up their minds about who I was. I thought success would earn me a seat at their table, but I never even liked the food they served. So I built my own. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But the moment I stopped looking for their approval, something in me unlocked. I doubled down on my projects. I stopped playing small. I started mentoring young developers, speaking at tech meetups, even joined a small angel investment group. Every time I helped someone else climb a rung I'd once slipped on, it healed a little more of that cracked windshield inside me. And the money? That came in waves. The second SaaS tool I'd built took off like wildfire. a project management integration for remote teams that just happened to launch at the right time. Within 6 months, it was featured in a couple industry newsletters, then picked up by a mid-tier influencer in the startup space. I woke up one morning to over 2,000 new paid users and a flood of emails. That week, I hired a small team. For people. Talented, hungry, kind. We built a culture from scratch. No egos. No golden boys. Just people who showed up and gave their best. I rented a small office space downtown. I could have stayed remote, but I wanted somewhere to go. A place that was mine. Every morning, I'd grab coffee from the same corner shop and walk in through the glass doors, smiling at the simple decal on the window that said the company's name, Lumen Forge. People thought it was fancy. It wasn't. It was 1,200 square feet with squeaky floors and a tiny kitchenette. But it was mine. And slowly, the weight started lifting. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. At least, not to myself. But my family? They stayed distant. Occasionally, my mom would send a text. Hope you're doing okay. Or saw something on the news about tech layoffs. Are you safe? I'd reply with a short, all good. Thanks for checking in. My dad didn't reach out at all. Ryan certainly didn't. I didn't even get an invite to Thanksgiving that year. Julia later told me they assumed I'd be too busy. The funny part? I was busy, but not in the way they thought. I'd taken a solo trip to Kyoto, something I'd dreamed of since I was 16. I hiked the Fushimi Inari Trail at dawn, sipped green tea in a centuries-old temple, and journaled under cherry blossoms even though it was out of season. It didn't matter. I was there, living, breathing. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. But the peace didn't last. Not when my aunt called me again, months later, and said, "You might want to sit down." I was in the office, going over some UX revisions when her name popped up. I answered with a casual, "Hey, what's up?" Her voice was tense, controlled. "I know you've been staying out of the drama," she said. "But Ryan's up to something again." I closed my laptop slowly. "Go on." "He's been telling people you exaggerated your success. Said the car was leased. The condo's rented. That the whole thing's some online scam. And," she hesitated, "he's been dropping hints to your dad that maybe you should be investigated." I blinked. Investigated? For fraud? Or something like that. He said there's no way you made that much money that fast. That it has to be shady. I felt the slow burn rise up my neck. Did Dad believe him? There was a pause. He didn't say anything. But he didn't exactly defend you either. I didn't answer. She added, "Look, Jake, I know you've tried to rise above it. But this isn't going away. And honestly, I think it's time." "Time for what?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "For you to know the rest." She paused. Then, in a low voice, said, "Ryan isn't just the golden child. He's not even your dad's only son." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I probably shouldn't say more over the phone," she said. "But there's something your parents never told you. Something they've kept from both of you for a long time." My heart started pounding. "Why now?" "Because Ryan's about to cross a line he can't come back from. And I think it's only fair you know why things have always been the way they are." I looked out the office window, at the skyline beyond. Everything felt different. Tilted. "You busy tonight?" she asked. I swallowed. "No." "Good. Come by after 6. I'll have coffee ready." "And Jake?" "Yeah. Bring a notebook." That night, as I drove through quiet city streets toward her house, something in my gut told me that whatever I was about to hear would change everything. Not just how I saw Ryan, or my parents, but myself. Who I was, who I'd always been, and why I'd never really stood a chance in that house to begin with. I pulled into her driveway just as the porch light flicked on. She stood in the doorway, waiting, holding something in her hand. A folder, thick, worn, and labeled in my father's handwriting. My full name. "Come in," she said, her face unreadable. "We've got a lot to talk about." When my aunt opened the folder, the first thing I saw was a photo. It was old, the edges curled, the ink slightly faded, but unmistakably my dad. Younger, mid-30s maybe. Next to him, a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, stylish, smiling wide. In her arms a baby. My aunt slid the photo across the coffee table. "That's you," she said gently. I blinked. "That's not Mom." "No, it's not." I stared at the photo again, waiting for my brain to catch up. "She's your biological mother. Her name was Natalie," my aunt continued. "Your dad was with her before he met your mom. You were born just a few months before Ryan. It's complicated." The room was quiet except for the ticking wall clock. She died when you were a baby. Car accident. Your dad was devastated, but she'd listed him on your birth certificate. When she passed, he took custody without fighting it. Your grandparents on her side weren't in the picture. Your dad met your mom less than a year later, and she agreed to raise you. But I wasn't hers, I whispered. My aunt nodded, and she never let him forget it. I leaned back, heart pounding. She always blamed Natalie, she said. Said it was a reminder of your dad's old life. She tried, I think. But when Ryan was born, it was like everything changed. Suddenly, he was the clean slate, the perfect do-over. And you were just the leftover. I didn't speak. I couldn't. It was like hearing a language you understood but never expected to. All these years, I muttered. I thought I was just less. Not good enough. But it wasn't that. It wasn't me. It was never me. My aunt reached across the table and rested a hand on mine. No, Jake. It wasn't. The folder held more. Old court documents. Letters. A tiny hospital bracelet with my name, written in faded marker. My aunt had kept all of it. She told me Natalie had been her friend once, briefly, and she tried to stay connected after the accident. But my mom pushed her out too. Everything to do with the past had to go. I left her house that night in a daze, the folder tucked under my arm like some ancient relic. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at nothing, letting the engine run. By the next morning, I'd made a decision. This wouldn't break me. This would fuel me. If they wanted to erase me from the family, then fine. I'd show them just how dangerous it is to underestimate the person you left behind. Not through revenge born of spite, but through one born of cold, deliberate justice. The old me, the one who sought their approval, who played nice, who showed up with polite smiles and harmless wine. He was gone. The man who walked into the Lumen Forge office that Monday morning wasn't just a founder. He was an architect, and he was about to build a reckoning. First, I gathered information. Not just about my family, but about my options. I didn't want to destroy their lives. That wasn't the goal. But I did want the truth to have teeth. I wanted Ryan, the golden heir, the entitled manipulator, to feel the weight of accountability for once in his life. I wanted my parents to look at me and see me. Not the placeholder. Not the quiet disappointment. Me. I started by meeting with a lawyer. A friend of a friend who specialized in family estates and business succession law. I laid everything out for him. The will change, the manipulation, the attempts to discredit me. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Do you have any interest in the business itself? No, I said truthfully. I have no desire to be part of it. But I do want to make sure I'm not being cut out illegally. And I want to be protected if Ryan tries to drag my name through the mud. He nodded. Let's get you a copy of the most recent will. You may have legal standing to contest it if your father was manipulated. Over the next few weeks, I built a quiet paper trail. My aunt gave me more background, emails, notes, even a voicemail my mom had left her years ago where she said, Jake will be fine. He's smart. But Ryan needs this. That was their mantra. I also started digging into the business. Ryan wasn't the genius he pretended to be. In fact, the deeper I looked, the more I realized he'd been bleeding the company, misusing funds, writing off personal expenses. He'd even used the company card to buy a Rolex, the same one he wore to that family barbecue. It was all documented, if you knew where to look. So I hired a private forensic accountant. 2 weeks later, he came back with a folder of his own. And this one was nuclear. Ryan had been shifting company assets into a shell business registered under a friend's name. It was sloppy, arrogant, and likely illegal. If it came to light, my dad's company could be in serious trouble. Tax evasion, fraud, even possible charges if they didn't act fast. I sat with the folder in my hands, heart hammering. I finally had it. Proof that the golden child had clay feet. But I wasn't done. I needed one more piece. So I called Julia. Can you do something for me? I asked. Depends, she said cautiously. Ryan, is he still dating that girl? What's her name? Amber? Yeah. They're rocky, but still together. What? Would she talk to you? Julia laughed. Absolutely. She hates him. Within days, Julia sent me screenshots. Ryan had been bragging in private texts, to friends, to Amber, to random buddies, about how he was going to lock Jake out of everything and claim the family business outright. He even joked that I'd probably crawl back to them eventually once my little app money ran out. Screenshots, dates, context, everything I needed. with my 3 folders, the birth secret, the financial proof, and the manipulation receipts. I began to plan. But I wouldn't go in guns blazing. No, I wanted a stage, an audience, and the perfect opportunity fell right into my lap. My dad's 60th birthday. He was planning a big party, dinner at a private banquet hall, extended family invited, speeches, slideshow, the works. Ryan was spearheading the whole thing, of course. Julia caught wind of it and sent me the invite. I wasn't even on the original list, but she added me manually. "This is it," she wrote in the message. "If you want your moment, this is the one." I RSVP'd, and I started preparing. I rented a black suit. Clean, tailored, modern, not flashy. But when I wore it, I looked every inch the CEO Ryan pretended to be. I had the folders scanned, labeled, and tucked away on a sleek tablet. And I called in a favor from a friend of mine, a professional videographer who owed me one. Discreet recording, I told him. Nothing fancy, just capture reactions. Audio clear. Can you do that? He smirked. Easily. The plan wasn't to explode the room. Not yet. The plan was to set the table and serve the truth, course by course, in front of everyone who ever watched me sit in silence. Aunt Denise offered to help. She knew my timing. She knew what to say. She'd be the one to ask the question, just like before. All I had to do was wait. And when the moment came, I'd stand. Quietly, calmly, and show them who I really was. The forgotten son, the silent heir, and the one holding the receipts. But that moment, that exact second when everything started to unravel, you're not going to believe how it happened. Because Ryan, in his arrogance, in his need to dominate every room, couldn't help himself. He forced the moment. And when he did, I walked right through the door he didn't even realize he'd opened. I showed up to the party 15 minutes early. The banquet hall was polished to perfection. Navy tablecloths, gold-trimmed menus, the faint scent of citrus cleaner still lingering in the air. A slideshow of my dad's life played on a massive screen near the stage. His high school photos, his wedding day, Ryan holding a Little League trophy. There wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. Not anymore. I felt ready. I found my table, back row, near the wall, of course, and took a slow breath. I glanced over my shoulder toward the entrance, just in time to see Ryan strutting in like he owned the place. Amber clung to his arm with a bored expression, her hair perfectly curled, her lips pressed into a polite smile. Ryan was wearing that same Rolex, the same one he'd bought with company money. I watched as people greeted him like he was royalty. Backslaps, handshakes, laughs. He soaked it up, eyes darting from table to table, already scanning for someone to impress. He didn't notice me. Not yet. But he would. The room filled quickly. Relatives I hadn't seen in years. Old family friends. Former coworkers. Even a few clients from my dad's company, judging by the branded folders on one of the front tables. And then, finally, my parents arrived. My dad walked into a small wave of applause. His salt and pepper hair neatly combed, a tailored blazer sitting stiffly on his shoulders. He waved, grinned, looked around the room. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Then uncertainty. My mom whispered something to him, her eyes narrowing. I held their gaze. Didn't smile. Didn't blink. Let them wonder. The evening moved fast after that. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Ryan gave a glowing introduction, talking about legacy and vision, and how proud he was to follow in his father's footsteps. The crowd nodded along. Polite applause. Then came the open mic. And that's when Aunt Denise stood up. She didn't grab the mic right away. She just raised a glass and cleared her throat. I've known John, she gestured to my dad, since we were kids. I remember the day he brought Jake home. A tiny thing, barely a year old. Scared, quiet, but smart. Always watching. People turned. Heads tilted. My dad's jaw clenched. My aunt smiled gently. And I remember thinking, he's going to be the one who surprises us all someday. There was an awkward pause. My mom shifted in her seat. Ryan gave a little laugh, trying to wave it off. Anyway, she continued, tonight's about family. And family, to me, isn't about blood or noise or flash. It's about integrity. About who shows up, even when no one's clapping. She raised her glass toward me. To the quiet ones. A few others raised their glasses too. Hesitantly. Curiously. And then it happened. Ryan stood. Okay, he said, laughing tightly. Let's not make this weird. I mean, We all know Jake's doing great for himself, right? I mean, what was it? An app? A YouTube channel? Drop shipping? A few scattered laughs, mostly from the younger cousins who didn't know better. I stayed seated. Actually, I said, calmly, I'd like to say a few words. Every eye turned. I walked to the front, tablet in hand, suit perfectly pressed, expression unreadable. Ryan sat back down slowly, arms crossed. I took the mic. Thanks, everyone. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but I guess I should have known I'd eventually have to. I paused, looking at my parents. I've spent a long time being quiet, being careful, staying in the background. And for a while, I thought maybe that was just who I was. The invisible kid. The one who didn't need anything. The one who wouldn't be missed. People shifted in their chairs. My mom stared at the tablecloth. My dad looked away. But I've learned a lot in the last few years. About who I am, where I come from, and why things have always felt different. I tapped the tablet. Behind me, the projector screen changed. Gone was the slideshow of Ryan and my dad. In its place, the scanned photo. My dad. Natalie. Me in her arms. There was an audible gasp. My mother's head snapped up. My father turned pale. Ryan muttered, "What the?" "This," I said, gesturing to the image, "is my beginning. A truth I only recently discovered. My biological mother. Natalie. She passed when I was a baby. My father took me in. And later, he married someone else. Someone who agreed to raise me, but never really accepted me." I turned to the crowd. I'm not saying this for pity. I don't want sympathy. I just want to make something very clear. My silence wasn't ignorance. It was restraint. I tapped the tablet again. New slide. Screenshots. The ones from Amber. Ryan's texts. His plan to remove me from the will. His mockery. His bragging. The room was dead silent. Then another slide. Accounting records. Shell company transactions. The Rolex invoice. This, I said, my voice still calm, is what happens when entitlement goes unchecked. When someone assumes they're untouchable. Ryan shot to his feet. "You planned this? You psycho. Sit down," I said without looking at him. The room froze. And to my astonishment, he sat. "This isn't revenge," I continued. "This is exposure. Transparency. I don't want the company. I don't want the house. I don't even want your approval. I've built my own life, from scratch. Without handouts. Without shortcuts." I looked directly at my father. "But if you think I'm going to let someone smear my name, cut me out, and launder money through a family business while hiding behind a legacy I was never even allowed to be part of, you're wrong." I turned back to the crowd. "I've already filed a report with the IRS. With the evidence I've submitted, there will be an investigation. Possibly charges. I've also hired legal counsel to contest any changes made to the family while under coercion or fraud." My dad finally stood. "Jake, we can talk about this." "No," I said. "We can't. Not anymore. You made your choices. All of you did." I turned to my mother. She looked small. For once, unsure. "I used to wonder why you hated me. Why nothing I did was ever enough. Now I know. And honestly, I don't need to carry that weight anymore." Finally, I turned to Ryan. He looked hollow. Rage and fear mixed behind his eyes. "You always needed the spotlight, Ryan. You needed to be the best. The heir. The king. But kings fall. And when they do, the quiet ones are already building empires behind the curtain." I placed the mic down on the podium, walked back to my table, and left. I didn't wait for the fallout. Didn't wait to see my mom cry, or Ryan yell, or my dad crumble. I walked out of that hall and into the cool night air, the doors shutting softly behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The next few months were a storm I watched from a distance. The IRS investigation went public. Ryan tried to deny everything, but the records were airtight. The shell company was traced. The funds were misappropriated. My dad's business took a hit, fast. Clients pulled out. Reputations collapsed. He stepped down quietly to avoid scandal. Ryan was removed from the company entirely. They offered me a stake, a chance to help rebuild. I declined. Instead, I sent a quiet donation to a scholarship fund in Natalie's name, the mother I never knew, but whose love I could now feel in the gaps between every cold memory. My aunt stayed close. So did Julia. So did a few cousins who reached out after the dust settled, apologizing for not seeing things sooner. Ryan disappeared for a while. Word got around that he'd moved states, tried to start fresh. My parents, well, I haven't heard from them. And I don't need to. Lumen Forge is thriving. My team has grown. We moved into a bigger space, one with sunlight and plants and laughter. Sometimes I walk in and just stand at the entrance for a moment, watching it all, knowing I built it. Not for revenge, not for approval, but for me. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction. It's about creation. About becoming so untouchable, so undeniable, that those who once dismissed you have no choice but to watch from the outside. And the best part? They can't take any of it away. Not anymore. Not ever again. I was never the invisible one. They just didn't know where to look. I'm 29, and my name's Tyler. Thanksgiving has always been a weird holiday for my family, like a performance we all pretend to enjoy while silently checking our watches and counting down the minutes until we can leave. But this year felt colder, more pointed. I'd had a rough couple of years, quiet ones. I lost my job during the layoffs, moved into a smaller apartment, took contract gigs to stay afloat. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Kayla, was being paraded around like the second coming of Einstein because she landed a job in public relations at some tech firm and posted a perfectly filtered life on Instagram. My parents adored it, ate it up like it was gospel. But I never expected them to be so blatant about it. When I showed up at their house this year, something was already off. The porch light was dimmed, and no one answered the door for a good minute. When it finally creaked open, my mom stood there, wine glass in hand, wearing one of those overly festive sweaters she probably bought just to look cute in family photos. "Oh, you came," she said, blinking as if I'd RSVP'd no. No hug, no smile. Just those 3 words, said flat like an afterthought. I stepped in, carrying the pie I'd made, and she barely glanced at it before muttering, "There's already dessert." I walked into the dining room and paused. The table was set for 10, 9 chairs filled, 1 spot left, but no place setting. Just an empty space at the corner by the window, where the light didn't quite reach. I waited for someone to notice. No one did. My sister waved from across the room, all bubbly and loud, her fiancé beside her already deep in conversation with my uncle. My dad gave me a brief nod from the kitchen, but otherwise, I was invisible. I placed the pie awkwardly on the counter and went to sit in the living room. Alone. Dinner was called an hour later. Everyone filed in. Laughter echoed, plates clinked, and I stood at the back, waiting to see where I should sit. Finally, I just pulled a stool from the bar and rolled it up near the end of the table. Nobody protested. They just let it happen. Halfway through dinner, the wine was flowing a little too freely, and that's when it started. My mom stood up, glass raised, and called for attention. "I just want to say how proud I am this year," she said, her voice already thick from wine and self-importance. "There's nothing more meaningful than watching your child flourish. So let's toast to the only child who actually made us proud." I swear, for a split second, the world stopped spinning. The air in the room tightened like a noose. Forks paused midair. Then every head turned to Kayla. And they clapped. They clapped like this was a rehearsal, and they all knew their parts. My sister beamed, like she'd just won an Oscar. Even her fiancé stood to clap. My mom smiled at her like she was royalty, and my aunt even whispered, "She really is the gem of this family." My hands were cold. I hadn't touched my food. I looked at the untouched plate in front of me. Cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes, turkey I didn't even want. Something in me cracked, but it didn't burst. It was quieter than that, more deliberate. I pushed back the stool, stood up, and the scrape of metal against wood caught a few glances. I looked down the table, heart thudding in my chest. "Thanks for finally saying it out loud," I said. That's when my dad, who hadn't spoken much all night, set his glass down hard enough to make it clink and said, "Wait, tell them what you did." I froze. Everyone turned. My mom's smile faltered. Kayla looked confused. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Kayla asked, her voice all sugar and silk. My dad leaned back in his chair and stared at me, not angrily, just waiting. And in that moment, I felt every eye lock onto me like I was holding a grenade. I didn't plan for that night to become what it did. I just wanted to eat, maybe force a few civil words, then go home and drown myself in leftover pie. But apparently, that wasn't in the cards. Not after what I had done, and not after what they were about to learn. I hadn't told anyone in the family yet, not even my dad, I thought. I didn't expect him to know, but clearly he did. And now he was forcing my hand. I glanced at him. He gave the slightest nod, the kind only a father could give. One part push, one part permission. I turned to the room, my throat tight. My sister stared at me like I was about to ruin her big moment. So I took a breath, looked at the table full of people who had just clapped at my humiliation, and said, "All right, you want to know? Fine." I looked down at my hands for a moment. They were shaking, not with fear, but something heavier. Years of silence and swallowing pride rising to the surface like bile. I took another breath, leveled my gaze across the table, and said, "You all want to toast to Kayla? Fine. But maybe toast to me first, because I'm the reason she even got that job." The room went quiet. Like, real quiet. You could hear the ceiling fan buzz. Kayla scoffed. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, not because I thought it was funny, but because I couldn't believe I was finally saying it. "Your company had a hiring freeze. They weren't accepting any more applicants. So when you begged me to review your resume, I didn't just clean up your grammar. I sent it to someone I knew in HR, someone who owed me a favor. I pulled strings, called in a personal reference, and they made an exception. That's how you got the interview. Not because you were better, because I handed you the opportunity." My mom narrowed her eyes. "That's not true. Kayla had plenty of qualifications. She majored in art history and couldn't explain what PR stood for in her cover letter." I cut in, voice steady. "You think they just saw her resume in a pile and said, 'Let's give this random person a chance during a hiring freeze'? No, I handed it to someone I mentored 2 years ago. The same company you all act like I've never been connected to." My sister's face went pale. Her fiancé leaned back like he was watching a drama unfold. My uncle shifted awkwardly in his seat, chewing slower. No one clapped now. My dad stayed silent, just watching. Kayla spoke, quieter now. "You never told me that." "Yeah," I said, shrugging. "Because I didn't need credit. I thought, maybe for once, I could just do the right thing without making it a competition." My mom's lip curled. "So what? You want a medal for that? You're bitter because we recognized your sister?" "No," I replied calmly. "I'm bitter because you've never once even seen me." I could feel it bubbling out now, years of it. "You remember when I won that coding competition in high school? National level. Got flown out to DC? You told everyone it was cute, that I was good with computers. Kayla got a participation award in middle school, and you threw her a pizza party. When I graduated college a year early, with honors, you asked if I was sure the ceremony was worth going to. But when Kayla finished a 6-week online course and posted it to Instagram, you printed the certificate and framed it." I paused. The words came easier now, but each one still stung on the way out. "When I helped you refinance the house after Dad's accident, you said, 'You're so good with numbers,' like I was a calculator. I saved you thousands. Did you ever say thank you?" My mom crossed her arms, face hardening. "You always make everything about yourself." I laughed bitterly. "No. You just make sure everything isn't about me. Big difference." Kayla looked down, then back up. "I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't tell them to toast to me." "No," I said. "But you soaked it in like you earned it. You let it happen. You always do." The room was still dead silent. Even the younger cousins had stopped fidgeting. I turned to my dad. "You really want me to tell them everything?" He nodded once. "They should know." I glanced around the table again. "All right," I said, quieter this time. "This is the last Thanksgiving I'll ever spend here. And before I go, I want you all to understand why." My aunt opened her mouth like she was about to interject, but my dad cut in. "Let him speak." I looked at my mother. "Do you remember a few months ago when you got that letter from the IRS about a pending lien on the house? And then, a week later, it magically resolved itself and you got a notice saying the case was closed? You said it was a clerical error. That God must have been looking out for you." She blinked, then frowned. "That was me," I said. "I paid it off. Quietly. Because I didn't want Dad to lose the house over something that wasn't even his fault. You didn't even ask questions. You just assumed the universe loved you." Kayla's eyes widened. "Wait, that lien was real?" "Yeah," I said. "And I used the last of my savings to clean it up." There was a long silence, and then my mom spoke again, her voice suddenly sharper. "If you had that kind of money, why didn't you help out when Kayla needed her car repaired last month?" I stared at her, stunned. That was the moment I realized it wasn't that they didn't understand. It's that they didn't care to. Kayla needed a car? That trumped a foreclosure? I had nothing left, I said. "I used it all for you." My dad leaned forward and finally spoke again. "Tyler's the one who bailed us out. Not some miracle. He sacrificed quietly, and I let him. I was too proud to admit we needed help, and he never rubbed it in. Until now." My mom just shook her head and stood up. muttering something about needing air. Kayla followed her out of the room, looking dazed. And then it was just me, my dad, and a room full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. He stood up, walked over, and put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stepped in sooner." I nodded, but didn't speak. The emotion was building too fast now. My legs were already moving toward the door. I grabbed my coat from the hallway and stepped outside into the cold November air. And just as I reached the sidewalk, I heard the door creak open behind me and someone call my name. I turned. It was Kayla. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. And then she said something I never expected. "Tyler, wait. Before you go, there's something I need to admit." I stood there, halfway between the porch and the street, feeling the cold sink through my jacket and into my bones. The kind of chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Kayla's voice cracked just enough for me to realize this wasn't some throwaway apology attempt. She was nervous, genuinely nervous. I turned, slowly. "What do you need to admit?" She didn't come down the steps right away. She just gripped the frame of the front door, like letting go of it would make her fall. Her eyes flicked toward the living room where everyone else still sat, awkward, silent, stunned. Then she looked back at me. "I knew," she said. Those two words hit harder than I expected. "I knew about the job," she went on. "Not at first. But after I got the offer, I overheard a call between your friend in HR and her manager. They mentioned your name. I didn't say anything because I wanted to believe I earned it. I didn't say anything. Just kept staring. I could feel something shifting in my chest. Not rage, not exactly. More like exhaustion soaked in disbelief." Kayla stepped down the first stair. I told myself it didn't matter. Like, the work was mine after I got it. But then Mom started acting like I was the golden child, and I didn't stop her. I let her believe I did it all on my own. I gave a bitter laugh. "You didn't just let her. You soaked it up like sunshine. You let her act like I was the failure, and you were the one who made it." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not proud of it." I shook my head, trying to gather my thoughts. "You could have said something anytime. Any of the 20 times she threw me under the bus just to praise you." Kayla came down one more step. "I was afraid that if I told them the truth, they'd just stop seeing me as special. Welcome to my entire childhood." I shot back, a little sharper than I intended. She flinched. And for once, I saw something raw behind her carefully curated smiles and social media filters. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was regret, and maybe something even deeper. "Shame." "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am. But that's not all." I frowned. "What else?" She hesitated, like she was weighing whether or not to say it. Then, finally, she stepped all the way down to the path and walked up to me, hands buried in her sleeves. "Last year, when Dad got hurt and you offered to help with the refinancing, Mom told me not to let you." I blinked. "What?" She said it would be a mistake to let you take over anything, that you'd just use it to hold something over us. So when you offered to help, she asked me to talk you out of it. I remembered that conversation, how Kayla had said, "Maybe you should just let them handle it. You've got enough going on." I thought she was just trying to be considerate. Turns out, it was more like manipulation dressed in concern. "I didn't want to," she added quickly. "But she pushed. And honestly, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." "But I did," I said, voice low. "I went through with it. I spent everything I had." "I know," she said. "And it's eating me alive." We stood there in silence for a moment. I could hear laughter again through the window, nervous, forced. Maybe someone had made a bad joke to cut the tension. Probably my uncle, who always treated conflict like it was a sitcom. I stared at Kayla. I saw the girl I'd grown up with. The one who used to sneak into my room when she was scared of the dark. The one who used to call me her hero when we were kids. And now, I saw the woman who stood by while our mom erased me one Thanksgiving at a time. I needed you to know," she whispered, "that I'm not proud of who I've become around them." I nodded, slowly. "Thanks. But knowing it doesn't change anything." "I figured," she said, looking down. I turned to go. But then her voice came again, small, almost like a child's. "There's one more thing." I stopped. She looked up, lips trembling. "I think Mom is trying to sell the house." I turned back. "What?" "She's been talking to a realtor behind Dad's back. She wants to downsize, says it's too much to maintain. But that's not why." "Then why?" "She wants the cash. And she said, if she sells it before the new year, she doesn't have to list Dad on the paperwork. Because the deed's still in her name. She's planning to sell it and move in with Aunt Linda." Dad doesn't even know. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She said he'll be fine in a condo, Kayla added. But she didn't mention giving him a choice. My hands clenched into fists. She was going to blindside him. Kayla nodded. She told me not to say anything. But after tonight, I just couldn't keep it quiet anymore. The front door opened again, and we both turned. It was my dad. He stood on the porch, silent for a moment, then said, "You should both come back inside. There's something I want to say. To everyone." Kayla looked at me, unsure. And I had no idea what he was about to do. But something told me it was going to be big. I didn't move at first. The front door was open, my dad standing there like a shadow cutting across the porch light. But my legs stayed rooted to the pavement. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to let them all sit in the wreckage of their own making. But then I glanced at Kayla. Her expression wasn't defensive or smug or even expectant. It was the kind of look that said, "This is going to hurt, but I'll stand here with you anyway." So I followed my dad back inside. The dining room had gone eerily quiet. Conversations had died off, the laughter replaced by the thick, awkward silence of people trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family implosion. My mom sat at the head of the table, glass in hand again, looking irritated more than anything. Not guilty, not reflective, just annoyed. My aunt and uncle were whispering about something between sips of wine. Kayla and I stepped into the room like unwanted guests crashing a party, which, ironically, described most of my holidays since I turned 21. My dad didn't sit. He stood at the center of the table, looking everyone in the eye before finally speaking. "I've made a lot of mistakes as a father," he began. "More than I probably even realize. But the biggest one was letting this family pretend that being loud meant being right. That silence was guilt. That the one who doesn't ask for attention doesn't need it." He looked at me. I've stood by and watched as Tyler's been treated like a ghost. Like his accomplishments were somehow less important because he didn't post about them or wrap them in a bow. And I didn't speak up. I let my silence become permission. My mother rolled her eyes and muttered, "Oh, come on." "No, you come on," my dad snapped, voice rising for the first time in years. "You stood there and made a toast to only one of our kids. You knew what you were doing. Don't act like it was innocent." She went quiet, lips thinning. He continued, voice calmer now. "When Tyler was a teenager, he used to stay up late helping me figure out our taxes because I couldn't afford an accountant. When I threw out my back and couldn't work, he took side jobs to help with groceries. He was 18, and when the IRS almost took our house, he paid it off. Without fanfare, without asking for thanks. Because that's the kind of man he is." A ripple of murmurs moved through the table. A few people looked genuinely shocked. And while we were busy clapping for Kayla, my dad said, glancing at her briefly, we were ignoring the person who was holding this family together behind the scenes. Kayla looked down, ashamed. Then my dad turned to my mom again. "And now I find out you're trying to sell the house behind my back? After everything he did to save it." My mother's head snapped up. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. She scoffed, rising from her chair. "It's not like I was just going to take the money and run. I was planning to help you. I've been managing this house for years while you've been working yourself into the ground. You were going to move in with Linda," he said, voice shaking. "And leave me where? In a condo you didn't even discuss with me? You made that decision for both of us. You don't understand how exhausting it is." "No," he interrupted. "You don't understand. You don't understand what it means to build something and watch your own family try to tear it down from the inside." My mom folded her arms, face flushed with anger, but she didn't speak. My dad turned back to me. "Tyler, I know I can't undo all the times I didn't defend you, but I see you now. I really do." Something caught in my throat, and for the first time that night, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. That was enough. But he wasn't done. "I'm making this right," he said, and pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "I've been talking to our lawyer. I added you to the deed." Gasps from around the table. "Starting next month," he said, "you and I will co-own the house. If something happens to me, the mortgage is yours, but it'll be fully paid off. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you deserve to have something to show for everything you've sacrificed. And no one is going to take that away from you." My mom stood up, voice trembling with rage. "You can't do that without my—" "Actually," he said, holding up another sheet of paper, "I can. Because the original refinancing we did, you signed your rights over to me as sole trustee. You just didn't read the fine print. And since then, I've had full control. So yes, I can. The color drained from her face. Now sit down, he said coldly. You've said enough for one night. And she did. Not because she agreed, but because, for the first time ever, she realized she was out of moves. Kayla looked at me with a mix of guilt and something else, admiration, maybe. Or all. Like she'd just realized the quiet brother she'd taken for granted had been playing 4D chess, while the rest of them were still learning checkers. I didn't say much after that. I didn't need to. The silence around the table said it all. Eventually, people started to leave. Quietly. No goodbyes, no hugs. Just the sound of coats rustling and doors opening and closing. Kayla stayed back to help clear the dishes. My dad poured himself a fresh glass of wine and offered me one. I took it. As we stood in the kitchen, Kayla approached me with 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. I don't know if I can fix all of this, she said. But I want to try. And not because I feel guilty. Okay, maybe a little because of that. But mostly because I miss having a real brother. Not just the idea of one. I raised my coffee. We'll see. She smiled sadly. Fair. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we weren't on opposite sides of the table anymore, either. As I left that night, I looked back at the house. It still looked the same, weathered, familiar, full of history. But something had shifted. For the first time, it felt like mine. Not because I was on the deed, but because I had finally reclaimed the space they'd tried to push me out of. The place I'd quietly protected for years. The next day, I got a text from my cousin I hadn't spoken to all night. It read, "We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a minute before replying. Don't be sorry. Just be better. And with that, I put my phone away, made myself breakfast in my tiny apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride. Not vindication. Peace. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology and start writing your own ending. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. My name's Lucas. I'm 29, and until recently, I thought I understood the rules of my family. Unspoken ones, the kind you only realize are there once you've broken them or been crushed by them. You know, things like, don't expect too much, don't outshine your sister, and never, ever, act like your feelings matter. I didn't always see it so clearly. When you grow up in that kind of environment, you assume it's normal. That birthdays are just whatever. That if someone forgets something important to you, it's on you for caring too much. You start to convince yourself that being overlooked is a sign of maturity. That maybe love looks different in your family, a little quieter, more practical. At least, that's what I told myself every time I got the short end of the stick while my younger sister, Chloe, seemed to get parades thrown in her honor. It was subtle at first. Growing up, her birthdays were always more exciting, more crowded, more Instagram-worthy. I'd get a few cupcakes and a "we'll do something later" promise that never came. Chloe, meanwhile, got balloons, entertainers, the works. I figured it was just a younger sibling thing. Parents still had the energy back then. But as we got older, nothing changed. If anything, the gap widened. Chloe got her first car for her 18th birthday. I got a pat on the back and a framed photo of me as a baby that I'd already seen 100 times. Again, I said nothing. That's what I was good at, swallowing things whole until they didn't seem real anymore. This year was different. Or maybe I was just different. I just moved back to our hometown after a few years away for work, trying to rebuild my freelance design career after a rough layoff. I figured being closer to family would help, maybe offer some kind of emotional reset. It didn't. I arrived in the middle of Chloe's birthday weekend, a 3-day backyard blowout that could have doubled as a wedding. There were white tents, live music, catered food, sparklers, even a rented photo booth. The whole neighborhood was there. My mom was wearing a new dress. My dad was flipping burgers and laughing like he hadn't had back surgery last month. Chloe wore a crown. An actual crown. No one even noticed I'd come home until Chloe saw me standing at the gate. "Oh," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I didn't think you'd be back already." I shrugged and smiled, trying not to take it personally. "Just got in this morning." She nodded, then turned back to her friends. I stood there for a few seconds, half expecting someone to offer me a plate, maybe ask how I was doing. Nothing. Eventually, I grabbed a soda and sat near the edge of the patio, next to a folding chair with a piece of cake frosting smeared on it. That was Chloe's celebration. Mine came 2 weeks later. I didn't expect much. Honestly, I didn't expect anything. But what I got still managed to sting. I spent most of the day working from the kitchen table, quietly doing some client revisions while my parents and Chloe went about their business like it was just another Wednesday. Around 9 p.m., I got a text in the family group chat that simply said, "Happy birthday, Lucas." No emojis, no phone calls, not even a knock on my door. 10 minutes later, my dad walked past me on his way to the garage and said, "Oh hey, there's some leftover pizza if you're hungry." I opened the fridge. There was a greasy box with 2 slices left, one with a bite taken out of it. That was my celebration. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there with the fridge open, letting the cold hit my face. My heart was doing that thing where it didn't know whether to break or go numb. I took out the box, reheated one of the slices, and sat at the table by myself. That's when my mom walked in, holding laundry. She paused when she saw me. "Oh," she said, like she hadn't realized I was still up. "You're too old for all that fuss anyway, right?" She gave a little smile, like it was some kind of joke. I didn't smile back. I just nodded, pushed the pizza crust away, and stood up. "Yeah," I said softly. "Too old for fuss." I went to my room, closed the door, and started packing. It wasn't an angry flurry of action. It was quiet, focused, almost mechanical. I grabbed my essentials, laptop, clothes, a few old sketchbooks. I didn't even bother taking the things I'd left in the garage or my tools from the basement. It didn't feel worth it. I left the half-eaten pizza on the counter, my bedroom key on the dresser, and a sticky note on the fridge that just said, "Thanks." Then I left. No dramatic exit. No shouting match. I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I ended up at an old friend's apartment on the other side of town, someone I hadn't talked to in a year, but who let me crash on their couch without asking questions. I turned off my phone before I even saw if anyone noticed I was gone. It wasn't until the next morning that I felt the ripple I'd left behind. My friend was making coffee when my phone lit up on the counter. 3 missed calls from Aunt Karen. A voicemail. Then a text. "Why won't anyone tell me where you went? Your mom is crying. Chloe is freaking out." What happened? I didn't answer my aunt's message right away. I didn't answer any of them. By noon, my phone had exploded with texts from every branch of the family tree. Some were frantic. "Lucas, where are you? Just call us, please." Others had that performative concern vibe. "Hey man, it's Chloe. We're all super worried. Can you just let someone know you're safe?" My mom's was the only one that stung. "I don't know what I did to deserve this. You could have at least said goodbye." I nearly laughed when I read that. She didn't know what she did. That was the part that always hit the hardest. Not the forgetting, not the favoritism. The complete inability to even see me unless I was useful or silent. But now that I was neither, now that I'd removed myself from the equation, they noticed the empty space like a missing chair at a table. That entire week, I didn't go back. I stayed at my friend Darren's place, crashing on his couch, offering to cook or clean his rent. He didn't ask for anything, just handed me a spare key and said, "Stay as long as you want." Sometimes that kind of quiet kindness hits harder than any family connection. We'd stay up late watching reruns or talking about our old high school band that never got past garage shows. And every night, I'd watch my phone light up with more calls. Chloe started posting cryptic stories on Instagram, screenshots of sad songs, black screens with white text like, "You never really know what someone's going through." My mom even posted a throwback photo of me as a toddler, captioned with "Miss you. Just come home." That was rich, considering she hadn't even remembered to buy me a cake. But I wasn't ready for what came next. A few days later, Darren handed me the mail. "You got something," he said, frowning. I blinked. "Here." He nodded. "It's from your parents." Weird, right? It was a pale yellow envelope with my full name written in my mother's neat cursive. No return address. No stickers. No clue what was inside. I hesitated before opening it, part of me expecting some emotional letter full of apologies or half-hearted justifications. But there was no letter. Just a folded printout of a group chat screenshot. At first, I didn't understand. Then I saw my name. My full name. I kept reading, and my stomach twisted. It was from a side chat between my mom, Chloe, and 2 of my aunts. The messages weren't old. They were from the night of my birthday, right after I left. Aunt June said, "Did he really just walk out like that?" Chloe replied, "It's Lucas. He's always been dramatic." Mom typed, "I don't know what he wants anymore. We feed him, let him stay here rent-free, and still it's not enough." Aunt Linda said, "Ungrateful. Like he's the only one who's ever had a hard year." Chloe responded, He's 29, not 12. What does he want? A pony and streamers. I reread that line about 5 times. A pony and streamers. That's what my birthday had been reduced to. A punchline in a family chat, right before they probably sat down and finished the rest of the pizza I hadn't touched. No wonder no one had come looking for me with any real concern. They didn't miss me. They missed the idea of me. The version of Lucas who stayed quiet and paid for things. Who smiled through being ignored. Who said, "Don't worry about it," every time his feelings were stepped on like a welcome mat. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back into the envelope, and set it on Darren's coffee table. "You good?" he asked from the kitchen. I nodded once. Then I opened my laptop and started typing, not a message to my mom, not a reply to Chloe, not even a snarky comeback to my aunts. I opened my email and started crafting a letter to our family accountant. Because here's something they hadn't mentioned in that little group chat. I wasn't just living rent-free. I'd been covering the property taxes on that house since Dad retired, and paying off the last chunk of the mortgage from my freelance income. Not to mention covering Chloe's credit card debt when she got in over her head 2 summers ago, and helping Aunt June when her dog needed surgery. I never asked for payback. Never even told anyone. I just wanted to help. But now, I was done helping, and they were about to feel it. I made a few calls, sent a few emails, requested a freeze on the shared family account that I had been managing and funding. I canceled the automatic payments linked to the mortgage, called the vet where I had been paying off Aunt June's balance, and told them to send future bills to her directly. Disconnected my Netflix, Hulu, and family Spotify accounts. No more shared passwords. I even called the catering company that had done Chloe's birthday party and asked for an updated invoice. I'd found out later that my mom had put it on my emergency credit card. I paid it, and then I canceled the card. The fallout didn't take long. 3 days later, Chloe texted me at 2 a.m. "What is wrong with you, Lucas? My gym membership is frozen. Did you really cut me off?" An hour later, my mom left me a voicemail, crying, "I don't understand how you could be so cruel. We're family. You just disappeared. And now you're punishing us? What did we ever do to deserve this?" I didn't reply to the voicemail. Not because I didn't have anything to say, believe me, I had plenty, but because I knew that anything I said right then would be twisted into something else. I could already hear how it would go. I was being petty, overreacting, making things hard for no reason. So I did the only thing I hadn't tried in 29 years. I said nothing. And that silence? It hit them harder than any angry rant ever could. By the end of the week, the group chat started unraveling. My cousin Beth, who usually avoided drama like the plague, texted me privately, "Hey, what's going on? Everyone's losing their minds. Your mom's been calling everyone. Chloe said you sabotaged something? I thought you were just taking space." Sabotaged. Right. That was one word for cutting off the people who used me like a human ATM. I still didn't respond, but I let her message sit unread. That was intentional. I knew how quickly word would spread that Lucas is ghosting even the nice relatives now. But here's the thing. It wasn't about who was nice or who wasn't. It was about who stood by while I was being picked apart, who laughed along, who said nothing when I was slowly disappearing into the background, and then acted surprised when I finally left. I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was removing them. It took exactly 11 days for the real panic to kick in. I know because on day 11, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Uncle Dean. Now, Dean's the kind of guy who never gets involved in family drama. He lives 3 states away, barely shows up for weddings or holidays, and last time we spoke, it was because I helped him troubleshoot a Zoom call during lockdown. He called me at 7:48 in the morning. I picked up, groggy. "Hello, Lucas." His voice was tense. "Your mom's blowing up my phone. She says the house might go into default." "That true?" I blinked. "She's only telling you now?" He paused. "I guess." "Said you stopped paying for things? That you left without warning?" I exhaled slowly. "Did she tell you about the group chat?" Another pause. "What chat?" I told him. Not everything, but enough. The birthday. The pizza. The text. The laughing behind my back. The way I'd been covering bills for years while being treated like a ghost in my own home. Dean didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he muttered, "Holy crap." "Yeah. And you never said anything?" he asked quietly. "No one ever asked." He sighed. "Well, I can't blame you. Sounds like they thought you'd just keep taking it. They always do." He didn't try to guilt me. Didn't tell me to be the bigger person or talk it out. All he said was, "If you need a place to crash that's not your buddy's couch, I've got a guest room." Just throwing it out there. I almost cried, but I kept it together. "Thanks, Dean." Really? We hung up, and for the first time in days, I let myself breathe. But I knew it wasn't over. Later that afternoon, my mom posted something new on Facebook. This time, she tagged me. A blurry photo of me at age 5, holding a birthday balloon, beaming like the world was still fair. The caption? "I don't know what I did wrong. I tried my best. But some people just choose distance over love. I miss my son." The comments exploded. Dozens of sympathetic aunts, church friends, distant cousins I hadn't seen since I was 12, all offering her hugs, support, prayers. Some of them even messaged me directly, asking why I was being so harsh to the woman who raised me. That was when I realized something else. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about image control. They couldn't reach me privately, so they were going public, painting me as the cold, ungrateful son who abandoned his sweet, heartbroken mother. And people were eating it up. Except, one comment stood out. It was from Aunt Susan, Dad's sister. One of the few people who'd always kept a low profile during family drama. She wrote, "Maybe if you'd thrown him something better than a leftover slice of pizza for his birthday, he wouldn't have walked out." No likes. No replies. Just that. But the silence after it? Deafening. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding, not out of anger, but validation. Someone else saw it. Maybe not all of it, but enough. That evening, Chloe texted me again. This time, it was a screenshot of their online banking app. Balance, minus $47.93. Auto payment declined. Her message underneath, "Hope it was worth it." And that? That was the moment I realized we were past hurt. We were officially in revenge territory. Because while they were posting baby pictures and guilt-tripping relatives, I was preparing something they didn't see coming. Something I'd been sitting on for years. I hadn't just left quietly. I'd taken copies of financial records. I had passwords, proof, receipts. I knew exactly how much Chloe owed on her car loan, how many payments Mom had skipped on her second mortgage. And most of all, I knew whose names were on everything. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about freedom, and I was about to take it. I spent the next few days preparing everything, not out of spite, not even out of rage, but with the calm clarity that hits when you finally stop waiting for an apology that's never coming. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I was just done protecting people who would never do the same for me. That night, I sat in Darren's living room, laptop open, documents spread out across the coffee table. He walked in holding 2 mugs. "Chamomile," he said, handing me one. "You looked like you needed something non-lethal." I half laughed, shaking my head. "Thanks, man." He sat beside me and nodded toward the mess. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I stared down at the bank statements. Chloe's overdue balances. The house deed with my name still listed as partial owner. All the things they never talked about, because talking about it would have meant admitting how much they relied on me. "I'm sure," I said. "They made me the safety net for years. Now they can learn what it feels like without one." The first thing I did was contact the bank directly. I'd co-signed on the second mortgage when my dad lost his job back in 2020, part of that whole family comes first guilt trip they'd laid on thick. They'd always promised it was temporary, just a cushion until things bounced back. But here we were, 5 years later, and I was still listed as a responsible party. So I asked the bank to initiate the process of removing my name. It wasn't easy. I had to submit letters, documentation of payments I'd made, and even call in a favor from a client who worked in real estate law to get everything in motion. But I had the records. Years of statements showing who really made the payments and who just took the credit. Next, I forwarded Chloe's credit card statement to her directly, along with a simple message: "This is yours now. Good luck." I then contacted the family accountant, Mr. Howard, an old man who always gave me butterscotch candies when I was a kid, and informed him that I'd be stepping away from all financial responsibilities regarding the shared trust my grandparents had set up. My parents had been dipping into it under the guise of upkeep and family expenses, but I knew better. I'd seen the wine delivery invoices and last year's receipts from Chloe's business retreat in Maui. "I see," Mr. Howard said over the phone, sounding genuinely concerned. "And you're sure about this, Lucas?" "I'm beyond sure," I said. "They made their choices. Now I'm making mine." By the time the paperwork was submitted, the group chat had turned into a battlefield. Aunt June had finally seen the screenshot of their earlier texts. Someone had leaked it to her, and she wasn't pleased. I didn't know who sent it, but my guess was Susan. Either way, the mask was slipping. The guilt post started drying up. The silence on Chloe's Instagram? Deafening. But they still hadn't called me. Not once. No apology. No accountability. Just radio silence, interrupted by occasional shade on social media and half-baked attempts at pity posts. It wasn't until the foreclosure notice showed up at the house that things truly unraveled. The bank had reviewed my petition, along with my documentation, and agreed that I'd fulfilled my share of the mortgage responsibility. Since I was no longer contributing, and they were already 3 payments behind, the foreclosure process was triggered. That's when I finally got the call. It was Dad this time. He hadn't spoken to me directly since Christmas. Even then, all he'd said was pass the potatoes. "Lucas," he said gruffly, "we need to talk." I stood in Darren's kitchen, phone on speaker, arms folded. "I'm listening." "What are you doing?" he barked. "They're threatening to take the house." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm not paying." "There's a difference. You're being vindictive." "Over what?" "A birthday." That made me laugh. I couldn't help it. "This isn't about a birthday, Dad. This is about years of being treated like a backup plan, a wallet, a footnote." "We're your family," he snapped. "No," I said, voice steady. "You're people who made me feel like I wasn't worth the cost of a cake. And now you want me to clean up the mess you all made? Again? Not happening." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, low and cold, "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "I regret not doing it sooner." And I hung up. A few days later, the fallout became public. Chloe posted an uncharacteristically long caption under a photo of the house, filled with phrases like hard times, betrayal from within, and rebuilding from the ashes. She never mentioned me directly, but the comments section was full of speculation. Some called her brave. Others asked what happened. A few, notably from people who clearly knew more than they were saying, hinted at long overdue consequences. And Susan commented, "Maybe if you treated your brother with half the grace you expect from strangers, this wouldn't have happened." The comment got over 300 likes before Chloe deleted it. That weekend, I visited Uncle Dean. His house was modest, clean, and peaceful. We drank coffee in silence, watched a baseball game neither of us cared about, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just be. No expectations. No side comments. Just space to exist without earning it. Weeks passed. Then months. I found a new apartment not far from Dean's place. Got a new client contract that helped stabilize my income. I even started seeing someone, Ella, a photographer who shared my love for early morning hikes and bitter coffee. She asked about my family once. I told her the truth. She didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, "That sounds heavy. I'm glad you left." One afternoon, as summer faded into fall, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a birthday card. A real one this time. No text. No signatures. Just a single $20 bill inside and one sentence written in tight cursive. I was wrong, but I don't know how to fix it. It was from Mom. I didn't reply. Because here's the thing about being treated like an afterthought for years. You start believing you deserve it. You shrink, bend, mold yourself around everyone else's comfort, until one day you break in silence, and no one even notices. But I noticed, and I left. And I'm not going back. Not for guilt. Not for obligation. Not even for $20 and a handwritten apology delivered too late. I finally chose me. And that was the best birthday gift I ever got. My name's Lucas. I'm 34 years old. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I learned early on how to be underestimated. I wasn't the golden child. That was my brother Jared. He was this star quarterback, the future CEO, the one with the jawline and charm that made my mom's friends fawn over him at family parties. I was the quiet one, bookish, awkward, more interested in coding JavaScript than throwing a football. While Jared's high school trophies collected dust on the living room shelf, my debate ribbons were stuffed into a shoebox under the stairs. I didn't mind, though. Not at first. I figured one day they'd see me. That if I just worked hard enough, long enough, they'd stop looking through me like I was a ghost at the dinner table. We grew up in Michigan, just outside of Traverse City, where our family had a lake house we'd visit every summer. That place was everything to me. It was the one place I actually felt like I belonged. Quiet mornings on the dock. The gentle creak of the screen door. Dad grilling while Mom fussed about mosquitoes. Jared mostly ignored me out there, but I didn't care. I had the woods, the water, my books, and later, my laptop. It was where I first started building things, websites, dumb little games, then later, tools that actually made people money. I launched my first real software product from that lake house, at 21, on a busted-up folding table with 2 bars of Wi-Fi and a cracked screen. But that house was never mine. My parents made that very clear. It was a family treasure, but really, it belonged to them. And by extension, Jared. They never said it out loud, but you could feel it in the way they talked. When Jared has kids, they'll love the canoe. Or someday, Jared will host 4th of July here. Meanwhile, I was the one actually fixing things. I was the one who rewired the old breaker box when it sparked one winter. I was the one who unclogged the septic tank when we couldn't get a plumber out in time. But when I asked, just once, if I could bring a few friends for a long weekend, Mom wrinkled her nose and said, "That's not really what this house is for, Lucas." Still, I kept showing up. I paid my dues. I took the long drives up north, fixed what needed fixing, mowed the lawn when Dad's back started giving out, and never once asked for anything in return. I didn't even live in Michigan anymore. I was out in Seattle, building my second startup, but I made time to visit, to help, to stay connected. I told myself it was about love, about family. That someday, I'd be part of the conversation. That they'd see me not as the other son, but as someone who mattered. The real shift started about 3 years ago, after Jared moved back home. His marketing agency had collapsed during the pandemic. Something about over-leveraged clients and a botched crypto partnership. He'd burned through his savings and returned to Michigan with his tail tucked between his legs. My parents didn't seem to care. They welcomed him with open arms and zero accountability. "He just needs a little time to get back on his feet," Mom told me on the phone, like he hadn't ghosted our family for the past year while living in Miami. When I flew in for Thanksgiving that year, Jared was already living at the lake house full-time. Temporarily, they said. He greeted me at the door like I was an Airbnb guest. "Shoes off, we just refinished the floors," he smirked, as if he'd done any of the work. My parents had given him free rein. He'd turned the upstairs office into his gaming room, piled boxes in the guest bedroom where I usually stayed, and started talking about renovation plans, like he already owned the place. I tried to ignore it. I stayed at a hotel, brought a bottle of good Pinot for dinner, and made polite conversation. But something had shifted. The energy was off. At dinner, my dad started asking me what I was really doing with my time. "You're still doing that tech stuff, right? Apps or games, or whatever it is," he asked, waving his fork around like he was shooing away a fly. "It's enterprise software," I said. "We help mid-sized companies automate." "That's nice," he interrupted. "But you're not one of those guys who burns out at 35, right? All hustle, no substance." Jared chuckled. "Yeah, dude. I read this article about how most tech bros crash and burn by the time they hit your age." Mom laughed like it was a joke. "Oh, come on, Jared. Lucas is smart. I'm sure he's got something saved up." Something. Like I wasn't even worth specifics. I clenched my jaw, smiled politely, and took another bite of stuffing. I could have said 1,000 things. I could have told them how my company had just closed its Series B, how we'd hired our 40th employee, how I was flying to Zurich in 2 weeks to speak at a tech conference. But I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't matter. Not to them. Not when it wasn't their definition of success. That Christmas was worse. I arrived late. My flight had been delayed, and I landed in a snowstorm. When I pulled into the driveway at the lake house, there was no spot left for me to park. Jared had 3 cars there, including one shiny new leased BMW he absolutely could not afford. I ended up leaving my rental at the bottom of the hill and trudging up with my suitcase, boots sinking into fresh snow. Inside, it was like walking into someone else's house. Jared's girlfriend, some Instagram model turned wellness coach named Britt, was lighting candles all over the place, even though Dad was allergic to most scents. The living room had been redecorated, with all the rustic furniture I'd grown up with replaced by sleek white couches and gold-framed mirrors. Britt looked me up and down when I entered, didn't even say hi. Just, "Oh, you're Lucas." "Last I checked," I said. She shrugged. "I thought you'd be taller." Dinner was awkward from the start. Jared sat at the head of the table. My dad didn't even question it. The turkey was dry, the wine was cheap, and nobody asked me a single question about my life. Not once. Instead, they fawned over Jared's new consulting business and his plans to scale a content agency through AI. I wanted to laugh. He didn't even know how ChatGPT worked. Then, After dessert, when everyone was full, tipsy, and relaxed, Dad raised his glass. "I've got an announcement," he said, eyes twinkling like he was about to drop the best news in the world. "We've decided. It's time to sell the lake house." A pause. Mom smiled and put her hand on his. "It's been a good run," she added. "But the upkeep, the taxes, it's just too much. And frankly, we'd rather enjoy the money while we still can." I blinked. "Wait, really? You're selling it?" Dad nodded. "We've got a buyer already. Silver Pine Ventures. 12 million. All cash." Jared hooped. "That's incredible. Finally, time to get rid of this drafty, old money pit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Wait, 12 million? Isn't this place appraised at, like, 6? Dad grinned. "Silver Pine must really want the location. We're not asking questions. We signed the contract yesterday." Then he turned to me. "And before you ask, no, you're not getting a dime. We're putting it all into a trust for your mother and me. Jared's been helping out a lot lately, so we'll take care of him down the line. But you've got your little business, don't you?" My mouth went dry. The room seemed to spin. "Good," Jared said with a smug nod. "You never deserved it anyway." I stared at them. My parents. My brother. Britt, filing her nails like this was all some reality show. And I felt it. This quiet click in my chest. Like a switch flipping. I set down my wine glass gently, looked Dad in the eye, and said, "Dad, I am Silver Pine Ventures." The room fell dead silent. Mom's fork slipped off her plate and clinked against the china. Jared furrowed his brow. "Wait, what?" I smiled, slow and calm. "Yeah, I bought the house." And that's when everything changed. The silence after my words was the kind that presses into your ears, not just from shock, but from something deeper, something unraveling. My mother blinked, lips parted slightly, as if her brain had lagged behind the conversation. Jared let out this incredulous laugh, the kind people make when they think you're lying just to save face. "Yeah, right," he scoffed. "You expect us to believe you have 12 million lying around to drop on a cabin in the woods?" "It's not a cabin," I said quietly. "And yes, I do." Jared looked to Dad like he was expecting backup, but Dad's face was already turning a strange shade, somewhere between red and pale, like he wasn't sure whether to get angry or scared. "That's ridiculous," Mom said finally, forcing a chuckle. "Don't be dramatic, Lucas. This isn't a game." I reached slowly into my coat pocket, pulled out a neatly folded copy of the purchase agreement, one I had printed just in case this exact moment ever happened, and placed it on the table, right beside the cranberry sauce. "Page 3, I said, right above the wire instructions. "Buyer, Silver Pine Ventures, LLC. Managing Director, Lucas D. Hartwell." My full name. My signature. Notarized. Dad picked it up with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned it once, then again, then a third time, like the words would magically change if he stared hard enough. "Impossible," he whispered. "It's not," I said. "You signed the documents. You just didn't bother checking who was behind the shell company. It wasn't even hard to pull off. I'd hired a real estate acquisition firm months ago under Silver Pine's name. They were instructed to approach Dad as if they were interested in development, something sleek and modern, like lakeside condos. The offer was deliberately outrageous. The team was told to act fast, fly in, flatter him, talk big numbers, lean on phrases like legacy and asset divestment. Dad ate it up. "I knew you wouldn't sell it to me directly," I said. "You never thought I was worthy of it." Nobody spoke. You could have heard snow falling on the roof. Jared was the first to react, pushing up from the table so fast his chair screeched across the hardwood. "No, no. This is bulls. This is a joke. You're messing with us. You're playing some sick game to embarrass Dad." "You embarrassed yourselves," I replied. "I just made an offer." Mom's eyes were wide now. She looked at Dad, panic in her voice. "You said it was a private investor. You said it was some California tech firm." Dad looked genuinely ill. I didn't check. The lawyers handled. "You didn't check because you never once considered that I could be behind anything of value," I said, standing now too. My voice was calm, almost quiet, but every word hit like a hammer. "You made it crystal clear, year after year, that Jared was the future of this family. I was just the weird one with his head in a screen. But guess what? That screen built me a company with cash on hand, a company that now owns this house." Jared was pacing now, muttering under his breath. He looked at me like I'd grown horns. You seriously bought the house out from under our family? He spat. What kind of selfish, vindictive freak does that? I turned to him fully. The kind who was told his whole life he didn't belong here. The kind who finally decided to stop asking for permission. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. The next morning, I woke up early and walked out onto the deck, the same deck I'd sat on as a teenager, watching the lake shimmer in the morning sun. Except now it was mine. And yet, even as that thought settled in, I felt a strange weight in my chest, part pride, part grief. This wasn't how I wanted it to be. I didn't want a victory shaped like exile. I made coffee and waited. And sure enough, Jared came stomping into the kitchen around 7 a.m., eyes bloodshot, shirt wrinkled, already seething. You think this changes anything? He said. You really think owning this place makes you family now? I looked at him, mug in hand. No, it just makes me the owner. He slammed his palm against the counter. You're going to sell it back. You hear me? I'll get Mom and Dad to pool together money. You don't get to take this from us. I raised an eyebrow. From you? Jared, you've been squatting here for free for a year. You haven't paid a cent in property taxes, maintenance, or bills. You treat this place like it's your birthright. It is, he said, almost shouting now. You don't deserve this place. You don't even care about tradition or family. You live in Seattle with your smug little startup and think that makes you better than us. I set the coffee down slowly and walked to the doorway. No, Jared, I said. I don't think I'm better. I think I worked harder. And I stopped waiting for your approval a long time ago. He stared at me, mouth working like he wanted to say something cruel, but couldn't find the words. Then he stormed out. The manipulation started right after breakfast. Mom pulled me aside, her tone syrupy sweet. Lucas, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said. You've always been so practical, she continued, ignoring me. Surely you don't actually want to keep the lake house. You live so far away. You'd never use it. It's just sitting here. It should go to someone who can care for it. Someone with family. I didn't respond. I just sipped my coffee. Think about your nieces and nephews, she added, even though Jared didn't have kids yet. Wouldn't you want them to grow up here? Wouldn't you have wanted me to grow up feeling like I belonged here? I replied. She blinked. That's not fair, Lucas. No, I said. It's overdue. By afternoon, it was Dad's turn. He came in from the garage, looking somber. Look, he said, I was surprised last night. I admit that, but I've had some time to think. I suppose I should be proud. I didn't do it for your pride, I said. Still, he said, voice low, this is a serious piece of property. You're going to need help managing it. Insurance, utilities, winterization. I've already hired a property manager, I said, and a lawyer, and a security firm. Everything's covered. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore, like he was still trying to find the old Lucas, the one who stayed quiet, the one who always helped but never asked for anything. That Lucas was gone. The next 2 days were unbearable. Jared started posting passive-aggressive messages on Facebook, hinting about betrayal and greedy siblings. Britt kept whining that the vibes were off. Mom cried quietly over dinner, hoping guilt would work where logic failed. Dad retreated into silence, only emerging to offer bitter, clipped comments about family unity and disappointments. And me? I stayed calm, detached. I went for walks, made quiet calls to my legal team, arranged for renovations to begin in the spring. Because what they didn't know was that the house wasn't the only thing I'd bought. But that part comes later. Right now, the air is thick with tension and the walls feel like they're closing in. Jared's rage is simmering. My parents are scrambling for control. And me? I'm just watching it unfold. Because I haven't even told them the whole plan yet. And when I do, everything they think they know, everything they cling to, is going to fall apart. It happened on the third night. After the fake smiles, the backhanded comments, the stilted silences that came from a family quietly collapsing in on itself. I decided to stay in the guest room for the last few nights I was visiting, mostly to keep an eye on things, and because, well, technically it was my house now, but also because something didn't feel right. There was this tension in the walls, this low hum of desperation, like the people who used to dismiss me had finally realized I held the only lifeline they had, and they were panicking. That night, I was up late reviewing documents on my laptop when I heard voices in the hallway. It was past midnight, and the floor creaked as someone walked by my door. Then I heard the sound of Jared's voice, low, angry, and someone else. Dad. I paused my music and listened. She doesn't trust me, Jared was whispering. You saw the way she looked at me when I suggested staying through January. She's just worried about appearances, Dad replied. Your mother and I will talk to her. You can stay as long as you need. I'm not going to be homeless, Dad. I put everything into that agency. And now he's acting like he's the king of the castle. A pause. You promised, Jared said, voice shaking. I know, Dad sighed. And we're going to fix it. Just let me handle it. Lucas has always been soft. He'll come around if we press the right buttons. Soft. That word stayed with me like a hook in my ribs. But it was what I heard next that changed everything. You got the copies, right? Jared asked. Yeah, Dad said. They're in the study. Good. He's flying out Monday. That gives us 2 days. I didn't know what copies they were talking about, but I knew that tone. The whisper of a plan being made behind my back. It had the same venom as all the other times they made decisions without me. Like when they sold my childhood bike in a garage sale without asking. Or when they forgot to tell me they refinanced the lake house and put Jared's name on the deed, something I only discovered later when I requested public records during my acquisition process. That's how I'd found out Jared had been on the title for a short time, until they removed him to make the sale go through smoothly. They didn't even ask why the buyer wanted it in cash. They were too busy counting imaginary money. Now they were planning something again. I waited until the hallway was silent, then crept out of my room and padded barefoot down the stairs. The study door was closed, but not locked. Inside, the light was still on. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The same old leather chair, the cluttered desk, the antique lamp Mom refused to get rid of because it was your grandfather's. But when I checked the bottom drawer, I saw it. A folder, thick, labeled in Jared's handwriting, Plan B. Inside were half-printed documents, some fake, some clearly drafted with a lawyer. There was an unsigned affidavit claiming I'd lied about my identity to acquire the property. Another one said I'd used manipulative tactics to coerce an elderly couple into selling their generational home under false pretenses. There was even a fake email exchange, supposedly between me and a real estate fixer, where I bragged about tricking some boomer into giving up his precious lake house. My mouth went dry. They weren't just planning to guilt-trip me. They were planning to sue me. Or at least threaten to sue me. Jared must have dug through my social media, scraped together enough data to make fake screenshots. The whole folder was a bluff, but one designed to weaponize my silence. To scare me. To make me back off. I sat back on my heels, folder in hand, staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. This wasn't just manipulation. This was war. When I confronted them the next morning, the performance they put on was Oscar-worthy. I waited until we were all seated at the breakfast table, eggs, toast, the usual, then placed the folder right in front of Jared's plate. You left this in the study, I said casually. He froze. Dad stiffened. Mom blinked like she didn't know what she was looking at. What's that? She asked, reaching for it. Jared snatched it before she could touch it. Just some notes, he said. Old files. I tilted my head. Notes about what? Your fake lawsuit? The one where I apparently scammed you out of a house I legally bought. You were spying on us? Dad barked. You were conspiring against me, I said, rising from the table. This isn't about real estate anymore. This is about control. Mom finally found her voice. Lucas, you're being paranoid. Nobody is trying to hurt you. I laughed. Actually laughed. Really? Then what's this? I pulled out one of the fake emails. This one says I bragged about tricking you. Want to tell me who wrote that? Because I didn't. And it's time-stamped 3 days before I even made the offer. Dad stood, chest puffed out. That's enough. You've made your point. We were just trying to protect what's ours. What's yours? I asked. You mean my house? His jaw clenched. This house has been in our family for generations, he said. You don't get to swoop in with money and take it like a thief. You sold it, I said. No gun to your head. No trick. You sold it. Because you thought I was beneath you. That landed. Even Mom winced. I gave you every chance to be part of this family, I continued. Every time you ignored my achievements. Every time you made Jared the favorite, even when he was drowning in debt. Every time you needed help, and I came anyway. And this is how you repay me. Silence. I'm not soft anymore, I added. So here's what's going to happen. You've got 48 hours to vacate. And if I find one more forged document, I will press charges for fraud. You wouldn't, Jared spat. I smiled, cold, quiet, and final. I would. And I'll win. He threw his fork across the room. It clattered to the ground like a shot fired in a dead room. Britt let out a little gasp and bolted from the table. Mom reached for Jared's hand, but he pulled away, red-faced, humiliated. I turned and left the room. That was the day I stopped being their son in their eyes and started being a threat. But what they didn't know yet, what I hadn't told them, is that this house was only one part of the web I'd been quietly spinning. And the next move would shatter whatever illusion of control they still had. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It wasn't even the fake lawsuit or the lies they were willing to put to paper to make me look like a predator. I could deal with betrayal. I'd been dealing with it in quiet doses my whole life. Brushed off in conversations, excluded from family photos, treated like an afterthought, while Jared basked in unconditional applause. No, the worst part was the moment I realized I had hoped, deep down, despite everything, that this would be different. That maybe, just maybe, this one would make them see me. I thought that if I pulled off something big enough, smart enough, clean enough, undeniable, they'd finally stop pretending like I didn't belong. That they'd look at me the way they looked at Jared at his high school graduation, or when he announced he was opening his own agency. Like they were proud. But instead, they saw a threat, and treated me like one. After the breakfast confrontation, the house turned cold. Not literally, though it was the middle of December, but in the way people spoke, or didn't. The next 24 hours were suffocating. Nobody made eye contact. Jared started locking the bedroom door he and Britt were staying in, like I was going to storm in and throw them out myself. Mom tiptoed around me, clinging to an apron she didn't need to wear, offering tea with a forced smile and glassy eyes. Dad stopped speaking entirely unless it was to bark orders about the thermostat or grumble to himself while standing outside in the snow. I spent most of those hours in the upstairs den. It was the only place left in the house that still felt untouched, where the old pine shelves still held my childhood books, where the draft under the window hadn't been patched for years. I curled up in the same old armchair I used to sit in when I was 13, legs now far too long to fold comfortably underneath me, and stared at the fireplace. It had been years since anyone had lit it. That night, I tried calling someone. Just someone who might understand. I dialed Mia, my old college roommate turned best friend. She'd been with me since the first startup, through all the long nights and ramen dinners. Back when I still coded everything by hand, and we used duct tape to hold up whiteboards. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy from the time difference. "You okay?" she asked immediately. I didn't answer right away. I finally said. I bought the house for all the wrong reasons. She was quiet for a second. Then, talk to me. So I did. I told her everything. How I'd built Silverpine in secret, funneled the deal through acquisition firms so Dad wouldn't know it was me, how I'd poured months into the logistics just for that one moment of poetic justice. And how now, after finally pulling it off, it all felt hollow. "They were never going to accept you, Lou," she said gently. "You know that, right?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I thought if I played their game better than they ever did, I trailed off. But they just keep moving the goalposts. That's because they were never going to let you win. You were always just a placeholder for their disappointment. We stayed on the line for another hour. She didn't tell me what to do. She didn't have to. Just hearing someone see me, really see me, was enough to keep the grief from swallowing me whole. Because that's what it was, really. Grief. Grief for the family I thought I could still have. Grief for the boy who used to carry a toolbox to fix broken steps on the deck, hoping someone would say thank you. Grief for the man who built an empire just to be noticed at a dinner table. The next morning, I didn't go downstairs. I stayed in the den, opened my laptop, and started making lists. Real, concrete, brutal lists. Eviction logistics. Timelines. Legal contingencies. Asset tracing. I tried to play nice. I gave them time. I gave them dignity. But they'd crossed a line. Still, I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw dishes or slam doors or do anything they could twist into another reason to paint me as unstable. I'd been the ghost in the house long enough to know how power worked in silence. So I did what I do best. I started planning. First, I called my lawyer, Melinda, a whip-smart real estate attorney who didn't flinch at family drama. I explained the documents I found, sent her photos, gave her access to the shared folders I'd already created in anticipation of trouble. She confirmed my instincts. These documents aren't just fake, they're sloppy. If they try to file anything using these, we counter with fraud and defamation. I'll get a restraining order drafted if needed. Second, I reviewed the sale terms again. Buried deep in the contract, thanks to a clause I'd insisted on, was the residency rider. All previous occupants were to vacate within 72 hours of sale unless a formal lease was signed. I'd extended that window to be generous. They were now on hour 62. No lease. No agreement. Just squatters with good winter coats. Third, I forwarded a private message to my property management firm. Subject: January transition. In it, I detailed the plan to begin renovations in January. Full gut of the basement. Structural inspection. Rewiring. A second-floor studio. The works. They'd need the property cleared. Jared wouldn't be thrilled. I started organizing digital folders, filing everything by category. Legal, communication, contracts, photos. My lawyer would be pleased. This wasn't just business now. It was protection. By mid-afternoon, Mom tried again. She came to the den, tray in hand. Tea, biscuits, a sad little cloth napkin folded into a triangle. Just wanted to talk, she said softly. I didn't invite her to sit, but she did anyway. You know, she started, voice trembling. We only did what we thought was best for you boys. Stop, I said, without raising my voice. Don't rewrite it. You didn't do what was best. You did what was easiest. Jared was loud and shiny, and I was quiet and inconvenient. So you backed the son who made you feel proud in public. Her hands trembled around the tray. I never stopped loving you, she said. I never said you did, I replied. But love without respect is just guilt with a smile. That silenced her. I didn't kick her out of the room. She left on her own after a minute, eyes watery, mouth pressed into a thin line. And I just kept working. Because this was what I did best, building from the wreckage, turning broken pieces into systems, blueprints, power. But I won't lie. That night, when the house was quiet and I sat alone in the den, staring out at the frozen lake, I cried. Not loud, not long, but deep. The kind of cry that knots your chest and doesn't let go. Because no matter how much money you make, no matter how many victories you earn, being unwanted by the people who made you hurts. Still, I wiped my face, and I kept planning, because soon, very soon, the storm would break. And when it did, I would be ready. The sun rose slowly the next morning, casting a pale orange glow across the frozen lake. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the light stretch across the water like it was reclaiming something. The den was quiet, the house even quieter. It was the final full day of their 72-hour grace period. They didn't know it yet, but today marked the end of whatever fantasy they'd been clinging to, the one where they still held the reins. I'd spent the night finalizing every detail. The locksmith was scheduled for Monday morning, just after their time expired. The property manager would arrive shortly after to assess the place. My legal team had reviewed every clause in the contract and prepared a formal notice of possession. Everything was lined up. But beyond the legal logistics, something else had shifted. I had shifted. Something in me had gone still. Not dead, not cold, but quiet. Grounded. A part of me, the part that had always wanted to be chosen, to be accepted, had finally stepped back. And in its place was something stronger, clarity. I didn't need them anymore. And strangely, that realization didn't hurt. It freed me. I left the house just after sunrise. Drove into town, down roads I hadn't seen in years. Traverse City had changed. Sleeker restaurants. Boutique coffee shops. A new co-working space where an old hardware store used to be. I parked and walked into a quiet cafe I used to visit back in college. The barista was different, but the smell was the same. Bitter espresso, faint cinnamon. I ordered my usual black coffee with a splash of cream and found a seat near the window. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. While my family wallowed in confusion and passive-aggressive silence back at the house, I was signing a six-figure contract with a European logistics firm to license our enterprise dashboard software. They had dozens of warehouses and were hemorrhaging money due to inefficiencies. Silverpine's newest product would solve that. We'd been negotiating for months. This morning, it closed. An hour later, I got a Slack message from our CFO. Kayla, just hit $10 million in ARR. Want me to draft the investor update? Me. Let's wait until Monday. I have another surprise coming. Because that wasn't the only deal in play. The night before, after I hung up with Mia, she connected me with a regional developer group in Michigan. They'd been eyeing lakefront property for a luxury boutique resort, a sustainable, minimalist lodge designed for year-round wellness retreats. Normally, I wouldn't have considered it. But after reading their pitch, I realized something. The lake house could be more than a monument to my family's selfishness. It could become a legacy of my own choosing. The developers didn't want to gut the house. They wanted to preserve it, just upgrade it, expand the dock, build an eco-friendly spa, and a few small cabins down the slope. A blend of old and new. They even offered to name the retreat after the property's original name, Hartwell Point. They had no idea who I was when we spoke. By noon, I had a preliminary agreement in my inbox. It would mean demolishing Jared's gaming room and the guest suite he'd claimed as a personal kingdom. It would mean gutting the kitchen Mom always boasted about, but never really used. It would mean wiping away the last fingerprints of their dominance. I clicked accept. When I returned to the lake house later that afternoon, I found Jared sitting on the couch in the living room, laptop open, typing furiously. Britt wasn't there. Apparently, she'd left that morning after a loud argument that shook the upstairs hallway. Something about how she wasn't going to freeze in this depressing house with a bunch of losers. Not even Jared could charm his way out of her exit. Mom was in the kitchen, red-eyed, pretending to rearrange the spice rack. Dad wasn't home. He'd driven into town early and hadn't come back yet. But his truck was still in the driveway, which meant he was likely off somewhere licking his wounds. I didn't care. I was done offering space to people who only saw me when it suited them. Jared looked up as I entered, eyes bloodshot. "You're gonna regret this." "No," I said. "You are." He slammed his laptop shut. "You think you're the good guy in this? You bought your way into a house you were never meant to own. You think that makes you powerful? It just makes you a snake in a suit." I tilted my head. "You want to talk about snakes? I have the forged documents. The fake emails. A lawyer who's already filed them with a time-stamped record. If I wanted, I could sue you into the next decade. But I haven't. Yet." His mouth opened. Closed. He looked lost. Like he couldn't understand how the rules had changed without his permission. "You don't belong here," he mumbled. "I own here," I said. I walked past him, set my laptop on the dining room table, and called the property manager on speaker. "Hey, Tanya. Just confirming the walkthrough on Monday." Her voice came through, clear and professional. "Yes, 9 a.m. sharp. Locks will be changed by 10. Crew arrives by noon." I turned toward Jared, made sure he heard every word. "Perfect," I said. "Let's bring this place into the 21st century." He stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. I didn't follow him. I had too much to do. Over the weekend, I finalized the retreat proposal. I spoke with architects, environmental consultants, and local contractors. I looped in my assistant to coordinate timelines, tax filings, and city permits. And on Sunday evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I opened the email from my CPA confirming what I already suspected. Silver Pine Ventures now held $13.7 million in retained earnings. Enough to fund the renovation. Enough to expand. Enough to buy out the neighboring plot that my father once joked about, but never had the guts to pursue. It wasn't just a lake house anymore. It was a headquarters, a statement, a reclaiming. That night, I poured a glass of scotch, stepped out onto the deck, and breathed in the sharp winter air. Below me, the lake was silent, frozen and still. The stars shimmered in the sky above, clearer than I remembered. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was focused, because soon, the hammer would fall, and everything they built on favoritism and lies would crack. By Monday morning, the temperature had dropped below freezing. A heavy fog rolled in from the lake, blanketing the trees in a soft, bone-white mist. The house looked almost peaceful, like something out of a postcard. But inside, the walls were tight with tension. It was 8:55 a.m. I stood by the front door, dressed in a dark wool coat, a folder of legal papers in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. The locksmith's van pulled into the driveway right on time. Right behind it, Tanya's SUV crunched over the frozen gravel. She stepped out with a clipboard in one hand and a Bluetooth earpiece in the other, dressed like someone who'd evicted 5 people before noon. Jared came down the stairs still half asleep, hair a mess, sweatpants twisted. He froze when he saw Tanya and the locksmith unloading gear. "What is this?" he barked. "Notice of possession," I said, handing him a printed copy with my signature and a timestamp from the county clerk's office. "You've overstayed your grace period. You're kicking me out." His voice cracked like a teenager's. "Are you serious right now?" "Very," I said. "The locks will be changed within the hour. Tanya's team will begin the initial inspection and renovation prep this afternoon. You'll want to be out before then." "You're unbelievable," he snapped. "You think money makes you untouchable?" "No," I replied calmly. "But contracts do." I turned my back on him and walked outside. The cold bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I stood beside Tanya as the locksmith worked, the clinks and whirs of his tools echoing off the front porch. "Don't worry," she said. "We've handled worse. This'll be smooth." And it was. Jared had packed hastily, probably assuming he'd come back later once I cooled off. He didn't yet understand that this wasn't a tantrum. This was a chess match, and he was already 3 moves behind. By noon, the locks were changed. By 2 p.m., Tanya's team had walked every inch of the house, documenting damage, marking walls with blue tape, and preparing contractor access. By 4, I was alone again. But I wasn't finished, because while they'd been clinging to the past, I'd been building something far bigger. Silverpine had been growing quietly for the past 4 years, steady, intentional, out of the spotlight. We didn't chase press or flashy investments. We just built tools that worked. We didn't need a viral moment. We just needed time. And now, with our ARR crossing 8 figures and our latest software solution about to enter closed beta for Fortune 500 clients, we were no longer a small player. But here's the part that matters. Silverpine wasn't just a tech company. I'd spent the last 18 months transforming it into something else, a holding company, quietly acquiring assets, real estate, dormant LLCs, and shell corporations that held strategic value. Not because I needed more money, but because I'd learned something important from watching my family. Power isn't in what you own. It's in what people don't know you own. Take the property next to the lake house, for instance. Jared always joked about it, called it the junk yard, because it was overgrown, filled with rusted-out trailers and an abandoned boathouse. He used to shoot bottle rockets across the property line just to annoy the owner. The guy who lived there was a recluse, paranoid, always threatening lawsuits over trespassing. 2 months ago, I bought it, through a shell company. The deal closed in cash. The old man finally agreed after I offered him 30% over market value and covered his moving expenses to Florida. My lawyer even helped set him up with a new mobile home. The moment I got the deed, I had my development team fly in and drone scan the entire lot. The soil was clean. The slope was perfect for runoff. And most importantly, it came with water rights Jared never knew existed. Because of those water rights, I now controlled access to the dock and the inlet that fed the entire lake's boating route. Why does that matter? Because the local marina's lease was up in 8 months, and they depended on that inlet. I'd already started negotiations to purchase the marina's land outright and move operations to a newly designed private dock, one that would be built right behind the lake house on my shoreline. I wasn't just reclaiming the property. I was rerouting the economy around it. A week later, my assistant confirmed the LLC paperwork was finalized for Hartwell Point Retreats, a luxury eco-resort that would include wellness cabins, a spa, a private marina, and a smart conference center outfitted with Silverpine's AI tools. It would be sleek, discreet, high-ticket, and every guest would pass under a sign with my last name carved into the frame. The kicker? The local tourism board had reached out earlier that day. They wanted to feature the project in their spring promotion. Said they were thrilled a Michigan native was reinvesting in the community. They asked if I'd do a brief interview. I hadn't even told them my real last name yet. That night, I sat alone in the upstairs study, my study now, and opened an old memory box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos. Me and Jared at the lake as kids. Dad grilling shirtless. Mom sunbathing with a magazine. There was even a Polaroid of me with a fish I caught when I was 7, beaming with pride. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, Jared helped him bait the hook. He hadn't. I'd done it myself. Even my memories had been rewritten. But now, I was the one writing the story. And the final chapter was coming. Because just yesterday, Jared made one last mistake. He went to our uncle. Uncle Ray was the executor of my grandparents' trust, a man I hadn't spoken to in years, but who always seemed to orbit the family drama like a distant planet. Jared had called him to complain about my power trip, hoping to rally sympathy. Instead, Uncle Ray called me. Turns out, there was one asset left in the trust that hadn't been distributed, a plot of land just south of the lake, left to the most responsible heir. Uncle Ray had been watching quietly for years. After our call, he said simply, "I think I've made up my mind. He's transferring the deed to me next week." I thanked him. I didn't gloat. I didn't brag. I just thanked him. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes, it's about inheritance. And now? Now I had everything I needed. The house, the land, the access, the legacy. It began with an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. My initials embossed in silver on the flap, LDH. Simple, elegant, deliberate. Inside, formal letters addressed to each member of the family, Mom, Dad, and Jared, on Silver Pine Ventures letterhead. The tone was professional, detached. No insults, no emotion, just truth wrapped in legal formality. I'd spent weeks fine-tuning every word with my legal team, carefully choosing language that couldn't be misread or manipulated. They were hand-delivered on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while they were still reeling from the eviction and pretending like they had a case to build. I made sure to have them signed for proof of receipt. Each letter detailed the final terms. Immediate forfeiture of all keys, access codes, and possessions left on site. Anything not claimed by Friday would be considered abandoned and donated or destroyed. Notification of property renovation and zoning changes. The home was to be remodeled into a boutique retreat and corporate innovation center. All sentimental items removed during demo would be stored for 60 days. After that, disposed of at my discretion. Permanent ban from hosting or residing at the property without prior written invitation. Trespassing would result in legal action. Surveillance was already installed. An addendum listing a cease and desist warning. Any future slander, threats, or attempts to contact my company's investors or partners would trigger immediate legal response. Jared received his last. I asked Tanya's assistant to personally hand it to him in the lobby of the co-working space, where he was pretending to rebuild his career. She said he went pale as he read it, then muttered something about lawyers bluffing before storming out. But that was just phase 1. Phase 2 started the next week, quietly, efficiently. I called Uncle Ray and confirmed the final paperwork for the southern plot was signed and recorded. The land wasn't worth much on its own, just a patch of forest with no view, but it sat on the only viable road leading into the lake house property. And with my newly updated zoning rights from the county, I now had full control over road access. Then, I purchased the easement rights for the old trailhead that led to the public dock, an often overlooked detail in local property law. Jared had used that route his entire life, believing it belonged to the state. It didn't. It was privately owned. Now by me. And I closed it. Legally. Signs went up the next day, private road. No through access. Violators will be prosecuted. I even installed a gate. When Jared came storming back, red-faced and furious, shouting at the crew laying concrete foundations for the new cabins, they didn't flinch. They simply handed him a laminated copy of the trespassing ordinance and asked him to step off-site. He tried calling my cell. I let it ring. He tried texting. I blocked him. He emailed. I forwarded it to Melinda, who responded with a perfectly worded cease and desist and a single closing sentence. Mr. Hartwell no longer wishes to engage. Meanwhile, my parents tried their own angle. Mom sent a long, rambling letter, half apology, half guilt trip, about memories and family history and how she hoped I'd reconsider selling out to strangers. She included old photos. One of them was of me, sitting on the porch steps when I was 10, holding a fishing pole too big for my frame. Jared stood beside me, smiling like he'd caught the fish himself. On the back, Mom had written, "Together, always." I returned the letter unopened. Instead, I had a professional photographer shoot updated images of the newly cleared lot, the dock expansion, the foundation being poured for the wellness cabins. The photos were stunning, sunlight reflecting off the water, snow glittering across the beams, crisp, modern lines rising out of the earth. I uploaded the best one to the Silver Pine Ventures investor update page with a headline. Hartwell Point Innovation Center. Phase 1 begins. Then I scheduled the press release. A week later, the article hit the local paper. It was a full feature. Local tech founder transforms historic property into flagship retreat. They quoted me sparingly but respectfully, mentioned my Michigan roots, my desire to reinvest in the community, how the space would include eco-lodges, private retreats, and a state-of-the-art leadership lab for high-growth startups. The article went viral in the region. Everyone who had ignored me growing up suddenly wanted to shake my hand. Meanwhile, Jared's agency, his latest attempt at a comeback, was buried in debt. Turns out the investor he'd been bragging about ghosted him after one bad quarter. His clients, many of whom operated near the lake, were suddenly uncomfortable working with a guy banned from the region's most high-profile development. One even reached out to Silver Pine directly, asking if we offered digital strategy consulting. I said we didn't, but I gave them the number of a young, up-and-coming firm we'd quietly invested in 2 months earlier, a firm I now partly owned. They got the contract, and Jared got nothing. Dad tried to salvage his reputation too. Started telling people at the golf club that he'd sold the house to his son as a favor, that it was always the plan, that he was proud. Then someone showed them the article and the quote from the developer. We were thrilled when Mr. Hartwell approached us about the land. The family had no idea who we represented until after closing. The lie unraveled fast. People started asking questions, and the truth, quiet, undeniable, began to spread. At one point, a former neighbor texted me a photo, Dad standing in his driveway, alone, snow falling around him, staring across the frozen lake. No caption. He looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt done. I'd spent a lifetime waiting for recognition, waiting for fairness. I realized I'd been chasing something they were never capable of giving. But now I didn't need it. Because they could no longer rewrite the story. They could no longer say he was just the quiet one, or he never really did much, or thank God Jared was around to help. No. Now, when people looked at the lake house, they saw me. My vision. My name. My power. And that was enough. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, like water seeping into the cracks of a foundation, quiet, steady, and utterly unstoppable. 3 weeks after the press release, my mother sent a formal letter through her attorney requesting a compassionate reconsideration of the trespass restrictions. She wrote that she was struggling with the loss of the lake house and hoped I'd find it in my heart to allow visitation, at least during holidays. I didn't reply. Instead, my lawyer did. She reminded them that the property was now zoned commercial, not residential. That visitation rights didn't apply. That any future attempts to visit without written consent would violate both trespassing laws and a standing civil protection order filed in response to their prior attempts to falsify legal documents. Mom never wrote again. Dad, on the other hand, couldn't let it go. He tried spinning the story at his country club, claiming that I had pressured them into selling, that I'd tricked them with fine print. But no one bought it. Not after the local paper did a follow-up story on me. This time covering the impact the retreat was having on local job creation, the sustainability grants we'd applied for, the partnerships with tech incubators and mental health programs. A community center donated in my name was already under construction on the south lot. The town had moved on, but Dad hadn't. He came by the property one last time, uninvited. I was on site, overseeing the installation of the new glass-paneled dock when security radioed me. There's a man trying to get past the gate. Says he's your father. I told them to escort him out. Calmly, respectfully. I didn't go down to see him. Later that night, I reviewed the security footage. There he was, standing at the gate in a worn flannel coat, older than I remembered, eyes glassy. He stared through the bars for nearly 10 minutes, not saying a word, not shouting, just staring. Then he turned and left. Jared spiraled faster. Word had gotten out about the forged legal documents. A small-time blogger picked up the story, how he'd tried to fabricate evidence to reverse the property sale. The article didn't gain national traction, but it made the rounds locally. Just enough for potential clients to Google his name and decide, maybe not. His agency shut down 2 months later. He moved back in with our parents. I heard, through mutuals, that Britt was pregnant, but not with Jared's kid. She'd left him weeks before that letter was delivered and had already moved in with a dentist from Kalamazoo. I didn't feel pity. I felt distance. Clean, sharp, unbreakable distance. Because while they were unraveling, I was rising. The retreat opened that summer. The reviews were glowing. Hartwell Point became a haven for CEOs, artists, therapists, and thinkers, a place where people came to reset. The Smart Conference Center hosted industry roundtables. The eco cabins booked out months in advance. The private dock hosted yoga at sunrise and strategy sessions by moonlight. And I stayed in the main house. My house. Renovated. Modernized. Reclaimed. One morning, I sat on the deck with Mia, sipping coffee as the lake glistened in the sun. She smiled, watching a group of guests kayak across the still water. "You did it," she said. I nodded. "Took me long enough." She tilted her head. "Do you miss them?" I thought about it. About the birthdays ignored, the praise reserved for Jared, the jokes made at my expense, the years I wasted waiting for people to see me. Then I shook my head. "No," I said. "They never existed. Not really. Just the version of them I wished they were." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We sat in silence, letting the morning stretch around us. And then, like fate couldn't resist one last flourish, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. A photo. Jared, Dad, and Mom, standing outside a weathered suburban home I didn't recognize. The yard was patchy, the siding dull. A half-hearted "for sale" sign leaned sideways in the grass. Underneath it, just 3 words. "Hope you're happy." I looked at it for a moment. Then I deleted it. I stood, walked to the edge of the deck, and stared out across the water. The lake was still. The house was quiet. And for the first time in my life, so was I. You ever have one of those moments where everything you've quietly tolerated just clicks into place? Like every ignored slight, every backhanded comment, every "it's not that deep" moment suddenly adds up. And you realize, maybe it was that deep after all. That was me, standing in a 5-star hotel ballroom surrounded by marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a sea of people I was supposed to call family. My name's Jack, I'm 29, and I learned that night that sometimes revenge doesn't come from rage, it comes from clarity. Growing up, I was the youngest of 3. My parents, Linda and George, had my brother, Derek, first, then my sister, Claire, then me, the unexpected blessing, as Mom liked to say in front of guests, followed by a too loud laugh that made sure everyone caught the punchline. Derek was the golden boy, business school, charm, a jawline straight out of a toothpaste commercial. Claire was the family diplomat, always managing to stay in the good graces of everyone without ever picking a side. And me? I was the afterthought, the one they forgot to invite to brunch, but somehow remembered when they needed someone to fix their Wi-Fi or help move furniture. Still, I made peace with it. I built my own life, started my own company, small at first, then big enough that the kind of hotels my parents dreamed of hosting events and started calling me their client. I never bragged about it. I just kept working, showing up to family stuff, smiling through the subtle digs, and the "you're so quiet lately, Jack. Everything okay?" questions that never really wanted an honest answer. Then came their 35th wedding anniversary. Mom wanted it to be an elegant evening celebrating family and love. Her words, not mine. She called me one night, voice dripping with fake humility. "Sweetheart," she began, "you've always had such good taste. Maybe you could help us book a venue? You're so good with online things." Online things. I almost laughed. My company manages multi-million-dollar event contracts. But sure, I'm the kid who's good with online things. Still, I agreed. I found them the perfect venue, a luxury hotel downtown with panoramic city views, Michelin star catering, and a staff that would handle every detail. When the manager heard my name, his tone changed immediately. "Oh, Mr. Turner, of course. We'd be honored to host your family." Mom was thrilled. "You really came through for us this time," she said, like I'd just helped set up folding chairs for a church picnic. "We'll take it from here, though." And she did. The invitations went out, the guest list swelled to nearly 100, and when I saw the RSVP list, I realized I was the only one who hadn't been assigned a role. Derek was giving a toast. Claire was helping coordinate the slideshow. I was just a guest. That stung a little, I won't lie, but I let it go. It wasn't worth starting something over. Fast forward to the night of the party. The hotel ballroom looked like a magazine spread, soft gold lighting, tall floral arrangements, a string quartet playing in the corner. Everyone was dressed like royalty. When I walked in, a few relatives I hadn't seen in years clapped me on the back, saying things like, "Look who made it. The successful one." But then Mom swooped in, smile wide, eyes darting like she was scanning for imperfections. "Jack, you're here," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look casual." I glanced down at my tailored suit. "It's Armani." "Of course," she said quickly, then looped her arm around mine. "Come on, let me show you where you're sitting." Now here's the thing. At events like these, you don't expect to be front and center, but you also don't expect to be exiled. And yet, as we weave through tables of laughing adults, champagne glasses clinking, I realized we weren't stopping anywhere near the main tables. Finally, she stopped at the back, by the buffet, no less, at a small table with a handful of kids. And not, like, teens. Toddlers. One was gnawing on a breadstick. Another had a balloon tied to their wrist. "There you go," Mom said cheerfully. "We didn't have enough room at the main tables, but this way you can keep an eye on the little ones. Isn't that sweet?" I blinked. "You're kidding." "Oh, don't make that face, Jack. It's just seating. You don't mind, do you?" I could feel a dozen eyes on me. My aunt's whispering. My cousins pretending not to stare. Derek, at the front, grinning at something Dad said. "No," I said finally. "I don't mind." Mom beamed. "That's my easygoing boy." She floated off before I could say another word. I sat down. A little girl immediately asked if I knew how to blow up balloons. I said sure. Another kid spilled apple juice near my shoes. I helped clean it up with a napkin, smiling like it didn't bother me, even though inside I was simmering. Then the speeches started. Derek went first, talking about how Mom and Dad taught us about family, loyalty, and love. Claire followed, reading a touching tribute about how, no matter where life takes us, we always come home to each other. I sat there, surrounded by kids who didn't even know what was going on, listening to my siblings paint this perfect family portrait that felt like a parody of my actual life. Every word they said felt like sandpaper against my patience. The laughter, the applause, the way my parents smiled at them like they'd just won Oscars. Then Dad stood up to thank everyone. "We're so proud of our children," he said, gesturing to Derek and Claire. "They've made us so proud. Hard workers, loyal, family-oriented." His voice trailed off for half a second, like he'd just remembered I existed. "And of course, Jack, who helped us book this wonderful venue." Polite chuckles. I nodded once, lips tight. Something in me went very still. It wasn't the insult itself, it was the casualness of it. Like being treated as an afterthought had become tradition. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled, excused myself, and stepped outside into the cool night air. I took a deep breath, phone already in my hand before I consciously decided what I was doing. The hotel manager picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Turner, everything going well?" I looked back through the glass doors at my family laughing under the chandeliers, their perfect night in full swing. "Actually," I said calmly, "I need you to cancel the reservation under my account. Effective immediately." There was a pause. "Sir, you heard me. Full cancellation. Event access revoked." "Understood, Mr. Turner." I hung up and slipped my phone back into my pocket, the smallest smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. 10 minutes later, I was still standing in the lobby when the hotel manager, the same one who'd spent weeks coordinating this event, walked briskly into the ballroom. I saw the confusion ripple across faces, the first hints of panic starting to replace the smiles. And that's when the chaos began. When the first signs of confusion spread across the ballroom, I almost felt bad. Almost. Through the glass doors, I watched waiters begin whispering to one another, their trays still in midair. The quartet faltered mid-song. My father's laughter cut off mid-sentence as the hotel manager leaned toward him with that particular kind of tight-lipped professionalism that only surfaces when something expensive has gone wrong. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the gestures, the wide-eyed disbelief, the sharp turns of heads toward my mother, and then toward the entrance, where I was still standing, hands in my pockets. It took about 30 seconds before Mom locked eyes with me. She tilted her head, her smile trembling like she still hoped this was some kind of misunderstanding. I gave her nothing, just a polite, unreadable look, and walked outside to the hotel garden. The air was cool, tinged with the smell of roses and city traffic. While the chaos brewed inside, I sat on a bench, phone in hand, pretending to scroll through emails. In reality, I was replaying every moment that had led me here, the years of small humiliations that didn't seem like much at the time, but had piled up like sediment. It started when I was a kid, Derek was the prodigy, the one who got the expensive tennis lessons and the fancy private school because he has potential. Claire was the family sweetheart, doted on by every aunt and cousin because she had that perfect balance of beauty and brains. And me? I was the quiet one, the good kid who didn't complain. My parents liked that about me. Jack doesn't need much, they'd say proudly, as if that were some kind of virtue rather than a subtle declaration that I didn't deserve as much effort. Birthdays were the easiest examples. Derek's 18th was a full-on catered backyard event with a live band. Claire's 18th got her a used convertible and a weekend trip to New York with Mom. Mine, a last-minute dinner at Olive Garden, where they forgot to bring the cake because Mom lost track of time, making Derek's work presentation the next morning. By the time I hit my 20s, I'd learned to laugh it off. That's just how they are, I told friends. They mean well. It was easier than admitting it hurt. So, I built my distance, not through rebellion, but success. While Derek was failing his second startup and blaming the market, I was working 16-hour days building a software company from scratch. While Claire was posting motivational quotes about self-care on Instagram, I was securing investment rounds and negotiating contracts with international partners. And through it all, I never said a word to my parents about what I was building. It wasn't bitterness, it was self-preservation. If they didn't know, they couldn't diminish it. Still, they found ways to pull me back in. The house needed repairs. Jack, can you look at the estimate? Derek needed introductions. Jack, you know people in tech, right? Claire wanted help setting up her online boutique. It'll only take an hour, I promise. They always came to me when they needed something, and always forgot me the moment it was done. And tonight, the pattern had played out again, just on a grander stage. I could hear the muffled echoes of raised voices inside the ballroom. The staff was trying to explain that the reservation had been canceled by the account holder. My account. I hadn't done it out of cruelty. Not yet. It was just an interruption. A pause. A reminder that I existed, and that maybe they shouldn't take my silence as consent anymore. But as I sat there, the heavy doors opened behind me. The sound of heels clicked across the marble floor. I didn't turn around until I heard her voice. Jack, Mom said tightly. What on earth is going on? She looked furious, but in that contained, socially acceptable way she'd mastered over the years. Even in crisis, she wouldn't let the mask slip fully. I asked them to cancel the event, I said evenly. Her eyes widened. You what? It's my corporate account. The reservation was under my company's name. I just called to terminate it. You can't be serious, she hissed, glancing back toward the chaos behind her. Do you realize how that looks? People are in there wondering what's happening. Your father is furious. Good, I said simply. She blinked, like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Good? You think embarrassing us in front of everyone we know is good? I think it's long overdue, I replied. But don't worry, Mom. It's just a seating issue, right? I'll sit it out. Her face twisted. Don't you dare get smart with me. This isn't about you, Jack. This is about family. Family. That word again. The word they wielded like a shield every time they wanted me to accept being lesser. I stood up slowly, hands still in my pockets. You're right. It's not about me. It never is. Before she could answer, Derek stormed out. His tie was loosened, his face red. Are you insane, Jack? What's your problem? I almost laughed. You'll have to be more specific. Don't play dumb. You humiliated Mom and Dad. You ruined their night. Did I? I tilted my head. Or did I just stop playing along? He scoffed, glancing at Mom for backup. You always do this. Make everything about you when you're not the center of attention. Can't stand that someone else gets the spotlight, huh? That made me laugh outright. You mean the spotlight I didn't ask for? The one you and Mom guard like a family heirloom. He took a step closer. You think you're so much better than us now, huh? With your fancy company and your suits and your big words. Newsflash, Jack, you're still the weird little kid who never fit in. Mom didn't stop him. She just crossed her arms, watching me like she was waiting for me to admit defeat. Something inside me shifted then. Not anger, exactly, but something colder. Like realizing you've been holding a door open for years and finally deciding to let it close. Thanks for reminding me, Derek, I said quietly. It's good to know nothing's changed. He sneered, ready to say something else, but Claire appeared at the doorway, her expression softer, confused. What's happening? Mom said the hotel canceled? I looked at her and felt a flicker of guilt. Claire wasn't cruel. She was just complicit, always trying to keep the peace even when peace meant silence. I canceled it, I said plainly. Her mouth fell open. Why would you, Jack? They worked so hard on this. Did they? I asked. Or did they work hard, making sure I'd never feel like part of it? Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. You're overreacting. You were being ungrateful about seating. I told you, we didn't have space. I cut her off. You had space for 50 extended relatives, 3 ex-coworkers, and a neighbor's dog, but not for your own son. You sat me at the kids' table, Mom. Her face went red. It was a misunderstanding. No, I said. It was a message. Loud and clear. For the first time that night, there was silence. Derek's mouth opened and closed like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Claire just stared, wide-eyed. Then Mom's expression hardened. You've always been so sensitive, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Everything turns into an insult with you. Maybe if you tried being part of this family instead of isolating yourself all the time, things would be different. There it was, the gaslighting, polished to perfection. I felt that old, familiar guilt rise for a split second. The one they'd conditioned into me since I was a teenager. Maybe it really is my fault. Maybe I'm overreacting. But then I remembered that moment inside. The applause for Derek's toast. The way Dad had almost forgotten my name. The laughter when I sat down beside the toddlers. I met her gaze and said quietly, I used to believe that. Not anymore. Derek laughed under his breath. You're unbelievable. You think this makes you look strong? You just made yourself the villain, Jack. Maybe, I said. But at least I'm the villain in a story I finally get to write. That shut him up. Behind them, through the open doors, guests were starting to drift toward the lobby, confused. The staff was escorting people out politely, offering apologies and vouchers. My father stood near the podium, rubbing his temples as the decorations were quietly dismantled around him. Mom turned back to me, voice low and sharp. You fix this. Right now. Call them and tell them to restart the event. I shook my head. Not happening. Jack, she warned. Don't make me regret trusting you with this. I almost smiled. You didn't trust me. You used me. There's a difference. She opened her mouth to reply, but then something behind her caught her attention. Dad had come out now, his face pale with controlled fury. He looked at me like a man who'd just realized his youngest son wasn't the pushover he remembered. Jack, he said, voice low and authoritative, the same tone he used when I was a kid and forgot to mow the lawn. Enough. Fix it. No, I said simply. He blinked. Excuse me. I said no. I'm done fixing things I didn't break. His jaw tightened. You're embarrassing this family. I think this family's been embarrassing itself for years, I said, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. Mom gasped. Derek muttered something under his breath. Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Because for the first time, they actually looked at me. Not through me, not around me, but at me. The tension hung thick in the air, heavy as the chandelier light reflecting off the marble. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it and saw the notification that the hotel had confirmed the full cancellation. Non-refundable, of course. Mom saw the look on my face and went pale. Jack, what did you do? I slid the phone back into my pocket and took a step closer, lowering my voice. I didn't do anything to you that you haven't been doing to me my entire life. I just gave it a setting and an audience. Her hand trembled slightly. Dad's mouth opened, but before he could speak, one of the hotel staff approached timidly. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, we'll need everyone to vacate the ballroom within 10 minutes. Mom turned to him, desperate. There must be some mistake. This is our anniversary. The staff member looked apologetic. I'm so sorry, ma'am, but the reservation has been rescinded by the account holder. Our system can't override that. I watched the words hit her like physical blows. The perfect image she'd built for years, the polished family, the adoring guests, the speeches about unity. It was all unraveling in real time. And that was only the beginning. Because what none of them knew yet was that the real reckoning hadn't even started. It's funny how silence can sound louder than shouting when it's filled with disappointment. The ballroom had gone from music and laughter to this uncomfortable quiet that buzzed in the air like static. Guests were whispering, packing up, trying to piece together what had happened without daring to ask directly. Some gave me looks, confused, some judgmental, some curious. I didn't care. My father, George Turner, always the image of control, stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, his expression unreadable. My mother hovered beside him, her smile long gone, lips pressed so tightly they were nearly white. Derek was pacing like a caged animal, muttering to himself. Claire kept trying to mediate, her voice shaking as she spoke to the staff, her words lost in the noise. I stayed near the entrance, watching it all unfold. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, maybe even some twisted sense of justice. But instead, what I felt was exhaustion. The kind that sits deep in your bones. The kind that comes from years of pretending things don't hurt. Dad finally turned toward me, his face flushed. "Jack, office. Now." I almost laughed. He said it the same way he used to when I was a teenager who forgot curfew. But I followed him out of the ballroom and down the hall toward one of the smaller conference rooms the hotel had reserved for family use. Claire trailed behind us, trying to calm everyone down, while Mom and Derek followed like a storm brewing at my back. The door shut behind us, muffling the distant chatter from the guests. For a second, no one spoke. Then Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Do you realize what you've done?" I met his glare. "Yes. You've humiliated us," he said. "Your mother is mortified. Your siblings are." "Perfect," I interrupted. "They're perfect. I know." Mom's voice cut through, sharp as glass. "This isn't about favoritism, Jack. It's about respect. You've crossed a line." "Respect," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You sat me at the kids' table, Mom. Beside toddlers. How much more disrespect could you get?" "It was a misunderstanding," she snapped. "You're being ridiculous. Do you have any idea how hard we worked for this night?" "Oh, I'm sure it was exhausting," I said dryly. "Ordering decorations and practicing speeches about family unity." Derek stepped forward, finger jabbing in my direction. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder. Always playing the victim. You think the world's out to get you? Newsflash, it's not. It just doesn't revolve around you." "I never wanted it to," I said quietly. "I just wanted to belong in it." For a second, he hesitated. Just a second. Then he smirked. You were never cut out for this family's image. You're not charming enough, not social enough, not fake enough." I finished for him. That hit something. His face twisted. "You're unbelievable. You act like you're better than us. But guess what? You wouldn't even have that company if Dad hadn't given you the starting money." I froze. The air in the room seemed to shift. "What?" I asked slowly. Derek crossed his arms, smiling like he'd just thrown a knockout punch. "You didn't tell him?" he said to Dad. Mom's eyes darted to my father's. Claire looked lost. "Tell me what?" I said, my voice low. Dad cleared his throat. "It's not important." "The hell it isn't," I said, stepping forward. "What is he talking about?" My father sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "When you first started your company, your mother and I, helped. Financially." I frowned. "No, you didn't. I used my savings. My first investor came 6 months later." He shook his head slowly. "Your savings were part of it." "Yes, but the account you withdrew from, some of that was money we transferred." "What?" I said again, my pulse quickening. "We set up an account when you were younger," Mom said quickly, trying to sound soothing. "You didn't know about it. It was meant for emergencies. Your father added to it over the years. It wasn't much, just a little help to get you started." That didn't sound right. I remembered that account. It had my name on it, just mine. I'd been careful with every cent. "Why are you saying this like it's a favor?" I said slowly. "You didn't tell me about it. You made it sound like I earned every dollar myself." Mom's tone shifted, gentle but condescending. "Oh, Jack, we just didn't want you to feel guilty accepting help. You've always been so sensitive about independence." I stared at her. "You mean you didn't want me to know you were taking credit for it?" Derek snorted. "There it is. The paranoia again." Claire finally spoke, voice trembling. "Wait, if they helped him, why didn't you tell him?" "That's kind of a big deal." Dad waved it off. "It's not a big deal. We did what parents do, supported our child." "Without telling me," I said, anger rising now. "Without giving me the choice?" "You should be grateful," Mom said sharply. "You wouldn't even have that company without us." And that was the moment. The click. The moment where something inside me broke cleanly in half. I realized it wasn't about the money. It was about control. All those years I thought I'd escaped their grasp, built something of my own, carved out an identity independent from their shadow, and now I saw it. They'd left a thread tied to me all along, just long enough for them to pull when they needed to remind me where I came from. "Wow," I said finally, laughing once under my breath. That's impressive, even for you. Mom crossed her arms. Don't be sarcastic. Oh, I'm not. I'm genuinely amazed. You spent years undermining me, telling everyone I was ungrateful, difficult, distant. And all the while, you were waiting to drop this little revelation so you could say I owe you everything. Derek raised an eyebrow. Well, don't you? That did it. I turned to him, my voice low, shaking but steady. You know what's funny, Derek? You've borrowed money from Dad 3 times to fund your startups. You've crashed every one of them. You live in the house he bought for you, drive a car he pays for, and you still call yourself self-made. But yeah, sure, I'm the one who owes them everything. His face reddened instantly. That's not the same thing. Of course it's not, I said. Because you're the favorite. Mom gasped. Don't start with that nonsense again. It's not nonsense, I said louder now. It's the truth. You've spent my whole life pretending I'm part of this family, while constantly reminding me I'm not quite enough. I was good enough to do your dirty work, to fix things, to book venues, to help out, but never good enough to be celebrated. Stop it, Mom snapped. I didn't. You didn't even invite me to your vow renewal in Maui. You said it was just for close family. I found out from Facebook. Her face went pale. That was years ago. Let it go. I did, I said quietly. Until tonight. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. If this is about money, Jack, we can settle it. We'll have the accounts reviewed and adjust whatever you think is fair. That stung worse than anything else. You really think this is about money? I said softly. It's about respect. Derek scoffed. Respect isn't given, it's earned. I've been earning it my entire life, I said. You just never wanted to see it. Mom threw up her hands. Oh, for heaven's sake, stop acting like some victim of oppression. We gave you everything. We supported you, loved you, and you turn around and humiliate us in front of everyone we know. Love me? I asked. No. You managed me. There's a difference. The room went very quiet. Then Dad said something I'll never forget. You're not as important as you think you are, Jack. He said it calmly, almost kindly, but it landed like a knife. Mom didn't flinch. Derek smirked. Claire looked horrified. I stared at him, feeling the words sink deep. All the late-night calls I'd answered, the favors I'd done, the birthdays I'd let slide. It all lined up, a perfect mosaic of indifference. Got it, I said finally, nodding once. That's all I needed to hear. I turned toward the door, but Mom's voice stopped me. Where are you going? Home, I said simply. Don't you dare walk out on us, Dad said, his tone sharp again. I paused at the doorway and turned back, meeting his eyes. You already did that years ago. And then I left. The hallway outside felt colder than before. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked calm, but my hands were trembling. I walked past the ballroom, where guests were still milling around, whispering. Some looked at me, others avoided my gaze. As I passed, I heard one of my aunts mutter, "Such a shame. He's always been so dramatic." I didn't even slow down. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and as the doors closed, I let out a long, shaky breath. I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd finally drawn my line and walked away. But when I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed again. A message. From Claire. Jack, please come back upstairs. They're saying things about you. You need to hear this. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, against my better judgment, I went back. And what I heard when I opened that door was worse than I ever imagined. When I stepped back into the hallway, I could hear my family's voices through the cracked door before I even entered the room. The tone was different now, lower, more conspiratorial. The kind of whispering that only happens when people think you're out of earshot. Claire had texted me 10 minutes ago asking me to come back. I'd almost ignored her. But curiosity, or maybe some small, desperate need to know, pulled me back. I don't know what I expected. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. But what I heard instead made me realize I had never truly been part of them. I had just been orbiting around a family that tolerated me like a shadow they couldn't quite get rid of. I leaned quietly against the wall outside, the hum of the air conditioning masking my presence. Mom's voice came first. He's always been ungrateful, George. Always. I don't know where we went wrong. Derek sighed dramatically. He's unstable. You saw what he did tonight. Who cancels their own parents' party? That's not normal. Dad's voice was heavy, measured. He embarrassed us, that's for sure. And now half the people in that room think we raised some entitled brat. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed silent. Claire's voice came next, soft, hesitant. He's not entitled, Dad. He's just hurt. Mom scoffed. Oh, please. Don't start defending him. You always fall for his pity act. He does this to make us look bad. He's been doing it for years, acting like he's some victim of his own family. It's pathetic. Linda, Dad murmured. Let's not say things we'll regret. But she didn't stop. She never did. No, I'm tired of pretending. He's always been difficult. I can't count how many times I've had to smooth things over because of his attitude. Remember when he skipped Christmas 3 years ago? I told everyone he was sick, but you and I both know he just couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Derek chuckled. That's Jack for you. Emotionally allergic to sharing a spotlight. I closed my eyes, jaw tight. That Christmas, I hadn't skipped it out of spite. I'd stayed home because I was working through a burnout so deep I could barely get out of bed. I told Mom I wasn't doing well, that I needed space. Her response had been a curt, "We'll miss you," followed by radio silence for months. Claire spoke again, her voice pleading now. He's not like that. He's just different. You all treat him like he's disposable. Mom's tone turned icy. Watch yourself, Claire. You don't know what he's capable of. He's manipulative. Manipulative. That word cut deep. Dad added, he's too emotional. Always was. That's why we never could rely on him for anything serious. You give him responsibility, he finds a way to make it personal. That's not true, Claire whispered. But Mom had already moved on, her voice growing distant and cold. Honestly, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe people will finally see who he really is. All that self-made nonsense, please. We practically funded his company. He wouldn't have gotten anywhere without us. There it was again, the lie they needed to believe. And Derek, always eager to twist the knife, laughed under his breath. I mean, come on. He acts like a CEO, but he still calls me to fix his tax forms. You'd think the business genius could figure that out himself. That's not true, Claire snapped. He helped you with your taxes last year. Oh, right, Derek said with mock innocence. Guess I mixed that up. Hard to keep track of who's doing who a favor these days. The room went quiet for a moment before Mom spoke again, voice dripping with disdain. I'm done coddling him. From now on, he's on his own. No more invitations, no more favors. He wants to be independent? Fine. Let's see how far that gets him. Something inside me twisted. I should have walked away. I should have left the building, gotten in my car, and driven home without looking back. But I stood there, rooted, my chest burning with a strange combination of sadness and clarity. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love that had conditions, trying to meet expectations that were designed for me to fail. And in that moment, I understood that I never stood a chance. I stepped into the doorway quietly. The room fell silent. Claire looked at me first, her face pale, eyes wide with guilt. Derek froze mid-smirk. My mother's lips parted slightly. Dad was the only one who didn't flinch. How long have you been standing there? Mom asked, her voice unsteady now. Long enough, I said. No one spoke. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken things. I looked at each of them slowly. You know, I used to think that if I worked hard enough, you'd see me differently. That maybe one day you'd actually. I don't know, be proud of me. But I get it now. I was never part of the picture. I was the background. Mom straightened in her chair, recovering her poise. Don't twist our words, Jack. You know we love you. I laughed quietly. Love me? You don't even like me. Stop being dramatic, Derek muttered. We're just telling the truth. No, I said softly. You're telling your version of it. The one that makes you all look like the heroes. Dad finally stood. You're being unfair. I met his gaze. No, I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time in my life. Claire stood too, looking between us helplessly. Please, stop. This isn't helping anyone. But it wasn't an argument anymore. It was a dissection. Years of suppressed resentment, finally exposed to air. Mom sighed and rubbed her temples. You've always been so ungrateful. Everything turns into an attack with you. We try to help, and you make us out to be villains. You didn't help, I said. You controlled. Every time I tried to stand on my own, you pulled me back. Every success I had, you turned into something you could claim credit for. Because we earned it. Derek shouted suddenly. We supported you. We made you who you are. I turned toward him, voice steady. You didn't make me. You ignored me until I stopped asking for help. Everything I built despite you. That one landed. Derek's expression flickered between anger and something like hurt. Mom gasped again. Dad's face darkened. You watch your tone, he said quietly. I took a step back, suddenly tired of the tension, the power plays, the constant need to prove something. Don't worry, I said softly. You'll never have to hear my tone again. And with that, I left for the second time that night. No one followed me this time. The elevator ride down felt endless. The mirrored walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized. Eyes hollow, posture rigid, face drained of color. When I reached the lobby, the hotel manager spotted me instantly. Mr. Turner, he said carefully, we've completed the cancellation as requested. Do you need us to process the refund? Keep it, I said. Consider it a donation to the staff. You've earned it more than the people upstairs. He blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. Outside, the city lights glowed like distant fires. I walked out into the night, my jacket slung over my arm. The distant hum of traffic the only sound that didn't feel hostile. For the first time in years, I had no plan. I took a cab back to my apartment, a quiet space overlooking the city skyline. Normally, that view gave me peace. Tonight, it just felt empty. I poured myself a glass of water, set it on the counter, and stood there staring at it like it might offer answers. My phone buzzed again, this time, not Claire. Mom. The message was short. We're disappointed in you. Don't contact us again until you're ready to apologize. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another message came through. This one from Derek. Hope it was worth it, little brother. You just burned every bridge you had. I turned the phone face down on the counter. Then Claire called. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something about her made me pick up. Jack. Her voice was small, shaking. Yeah. I'm sorry, she said. I tried to stop them. I didn't know they were going to say those things. I swear. I know, I said quietly. Are you okay? I hesitated. No, but I will be. Jack, she said softly, they're furious. They're already talking about cutting you out of everything. Dad said something about the will. I laughed under my breath. Of course he did. I'm serious, she said. He's calling the lawyer tomorrow morning. I leaned against the counter, rubbing my eyes. Claire, let them. I'm done fighting for a seat at their table. Then what are you going to do? She asked. I looked out the window at the city below, lights flickering like stars. What I do best, I said quietly. Build something they can't touch. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, you don't deserve this. None of us do, I said. But they taught me one thing tonight. When someone shows you your place in their story, you either accept it or you start writing your own. There was silence on the line. Then she said, whatever you're planning, just don't do anything you'll regret. I smiled faintly. Don't worry, Claire. I'm done reacting. I'm thinking now. We said goodbye, and when the call ended, I stood there in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of city life outside. It hit me then, how final it all felt. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was ashes in the wind. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the sadness, there was something else flickering awake. Something sharp. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix things. I was planning. And if my family thought tonight was chaos, they hadn't seen anything yet. The morning after the party, my apartment was filled with that kind of silence that feels too deliberate, the kind that presses against your eardrums until you start hearing your own thoughts louder than you want to. My phone was still on the counter, the screen black, face down, as if it too had had enough of the night before. I hadn't slept. I just sat there, watching the light crawl across the floor, replaying every moment from the night. The speeches, the fake smiles, the word ungrateful, echoing in my head like a bad song on repeat. It should have broken me. A few years earlier, it probably would have. Back then, I still wanted their approval, even when I swore I didn't. I would have sent an apologetic message, told myself it's not worth losing family over, and quietly carried the guilt they handed me. But this time was different. This time, something inside me had finally gone quiet. Not the defeated kind of quiet, but the calm before the storm kind. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the contracts tied to my corporate accounts, and started reorganizing everything. The event management branch, the investment portfolios, the subsidiaries under Turner Dynamics, my company. It was all mine. Every bit of it. The help my parents claimed to have given me wasn't even a fraction of what I'd built since. By the afternoon, I was sitting in a meeting with my COO, a no-nonsense woman named Priya who had been with me since the early days. She walked into my office holding 2 coffees and a stack of documents. "You look like you've seen ghosts," she said, placing 1 cup in front of me. "Something like that," I said. She studied me. "You okay?" "Depends on your definition," I said. "But yeah, I think I am." She raised an eyebrow. "That's vague enough to worry me." I smiled faintly. "I just realized I've been building something that can finally stand on its own. No strings attached." She nodded slowly. "You mean personally or professionally?" "Both," I said. Priya leaned against the desk. "Well, professionally, we've been due for a big move anyway. The investors from Seattle reached out again. They're offering to double the valuation if we expand the enterprise licensing." I blinked. "Double?" "Yup," she said casually, sipping her coffee. "Apparently, someone leaked our client list. They want in before we blow up." Normally, I would have been cautious. Expansion meant risk, long nights, endless logistics. But that morning, it felt symbolic, like the universe had just nudged me and said, "Go ahead. Let them see what they threw away." "Do it," I said. Priya smiled. "I thought you'd say that." The next few weeks were a blur of momentum. The Seattle deal closed. Then a London firm reached out for partnership. By month's end, Turner Dynamics wasn't just a boutique software company anymore. It was a contender. We were scaling faster than I'd ever thought possible. And through it all, I stayed quiet. No public statements, no LinkedIn posts, no "look how far I've come" speeches. I just worked. Quietly. Methodically. My family didn't reach out either. Not mom, not dad, not Derek. The only one who texted occasionally was Claire. Simple things. "Hey, how are you holding up?" Or "Mom's been talking about you again." Ignore it. I appreciated it, but I never said much back. I needed distance to think clearly. A month after the party, I got an invitation to a family dinner. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Claire. She wrote, "Please come. It's just us siblings. No drama, I promise." Against my better judgment, I went. We met at a small Italian place downtown, the kind of cozy, dimly lit restaurant that tries to make you forget the world outside. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting at the table with a glass of red wine and that smug half-smile he'd inherited from Dad. "Look who showed up," he said as I sat down. "Didn't think you'd have time for us little people anymore." I ignored the jab. "Good to see you too." Claire gave me a warning look. "Don't start, Derek." He shrugged. "Just making conversation." The waiter came, we ordered, and for a while it was almost normal. Claire asked about my company, and I gave short answers. Derek talked about some new investment opportunity he was exploring, which I knew was code for another half-baked startup idea. But as the dinner went on, the conversation took a turn. "So," Derek said casually, swirling his wine, "I heard Mom and Dad are making some changes to the estate plan." I didn't look up. "Not my concern." "Maybe it should be," he said. "You might be surprised who's getting what." Claire glared at him. "Don't start this." "What?" "You should know," Derek said with a smirk. "Dad's reassigning the house and the investment properties to me. Claire gets Mom's jewelry and trust fund. And Jack," he trailed off, pretending to think. "What was it again?" "Oh right, nothing." I set my fork down slowly. "You're proud of that." He leaned back, grin widening. "I'm just saying, actions have consequences. Maybe if you hadn't thrown a tantrum at their anniversary, things would look different." "Derek," Claire said warningly. But I wasn't angry, not really. Not anymore. I just smiled. "You know what's funny? You still think you're inheriting something that matters." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that everything you're clinging to is temporary," I said. "You're fighting over leftovers while I've been building the kitchen." He scoffed. "Oh please. You think your little company makes you untouchable?" I looked at him evenly. "No. I know it does." Claire glanced between us, nervous. "Guys, please." But I wasn't escalating. I was just stating a fact. Turner Dynamics was worth more than my parents' entire portfolio combined, and they didn't even know it. After dinner, as we stood outside by the parking lot, Claire touched my arm. "You shouldn't have come." He wanted a reaction. "I know," I said, "but it's fine." It reminded me why I stopped needing any of them. She looked at me sadly. "You're really done, huh?" "Completely." And I meant it. The next few months cemented it. My company expanded into Europe. I was traveling constantly, London, Berlin, Tokyo. Everywhere I went, I felt freer, lighter. I'd built something from nothing, And now I was finally standing on solid ground. Then one morning, while sitting in my London office, I got an email from a familiar name, George Turner. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Jack, your mother and I have been thinking a lot about what happened. Things were said that shouldn't have been. I understand you're angry, but families shouldn't be divided like this. Your mother's health hasn't been great lately, and it's been weighing on her. We'd like to see you." Dad. I read it twice. It was short, formal, carefully worded, like a business letter. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. But another part, that small, stubborn piece that still cared, hesitated. So I replied, "I'll be in town next week. Let's meet. Just the two of us." He responded within minutes. "Your mother will be there too. Friday night, 7 p.m. The house." When Friday came, I drove up the long driveway to my childhood home for the first time in over a year. The same manicured hedges, the same ornate gate, the same sense of staged perfection. Mom greeted me at the door, her smile brittle. "You look successful," she said, scanning my suit like she was appraising a stranger. "Thanks," I said. Dad was in the study, papers spread out on the desk. He didn't waste time. "I'll be direct," he said. "We've been having financial trouble. Some investments went south. The market's been unpredictable." I said nothing. He continued, "We were hoping you could help. Just a short-term loan. You're doing well, obviously." There it was. The real reason. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just another transaction. "How much?" I asked. He hesitated. 200,000. Mom added quickly, "We'd pay it back, of course. You know we're good for it." I studied them quietly. For years, I'd been the one chasing their approval. Now, here they were, desperate, uncertain, and pretending it wasn't obvious. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. "I'll think about it," I said finally, standing up. "Jack," Mom said, reaching for my arm. "Please. This isn't about money. It's about family." I met her eyes. "That's what you said at the party. But it was always about money, wasn't it?" She blinked, taken aback. "That's not fair." "No," I said quietly. "It's finally fair." And then I walked out. That night, as I sat in my car overlooking the city skyline, I realized something had shifted completely. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. Over the next few weeks, my company launched a new division, event management software tailored to luxury clients. The same hotel chain from the anniversary party was our first partner. I smiled at the irony. The more success I built, the more detached I felt from the people who once defined me. And yet, deep down, I knew this story wasn't finished. Because people like my parents, people who can't stand losing control, never stop trying to take it back. And I had a feeling they were about to try. The months after I walked away were careful, measured, deliberate. I didn't rush into theatrics. Revenge, I'd learned, isn't a fireworks show. It's a quietly built machine that hums until the moment you flip the switch. I tightened the company's contracts, moved key accounts onto separate legal entities, and quietly pushed our new luxury event platform into markets my parents cared about most: high-end venues, private clubs, the social circuits they used to parade through. I also made sure the one vendor they'd bragged about for years, the florist, the caterer, the band, was on my side. Small favors, old debts repaid, introductions made. Nothing dramatic. Just infrastructure and influence. When the time came to pull the thread, I didn't call a press conference. I sent a single, very polite email that morning to the hotel's corporate office. Subject line: contract review request, Turner Events / Turner Dynamics. In it, I noted our recent acquisition of their preferred event management suite and asked to review all standing reservations under our corporate clients to ensure no conflicts with newly integrated software. A board legal clerk forwarded it to the events manager who'd once fawned over my parents' booking. She opened the file, and because I'd set everything up weeks ago, it only took a few clicks to see what I already knew. The anniversary reservation was still listed under my company's client ID, tied to an old corporate card that, technically, hadn't been updated. The manager called our legal team. Our legal team called my assistant. My assistant called me and said, "We can either grandfather this through or ask for verification." I told her to verify. I watched the fireworks from my laptop. Polite emails, confirmation requests, the manager's voice trembling the first time she had to say the words "account verification" to my mother on the phone. I let it escalate just enough to leave plausible deniability. Everything above board, paper trails tidy, no dramatic language. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was trying to show them what it felt like to have control taken away in a room full of people who liked their version of the truth. Then I made one more move that felt almost petty and perfectly necessary. I arranged, through a mutual acquaintance I knew from the art circles my parents frequented, for a feature in a society column about the Turner Family Philanthropy Gala, a story my parents loved to be in, complete with photos and flattering quotes. The editor, who owed me a favor, asked for an updated guest list to coordinate photographers. I sent him an accurate one, minus the Turners. Instead, I included my new high-value clients, investors, and partners, people who liked cocktails and headlines. The piece went live that afternoon with a headline that would have made Mom proud if she'd been in it. I watched my phone as the first messages arrived. Confusion, then irritation, then, from Derek, a short, taut text. "What did you do?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the family group chat and posted one sentence. No flourish, no gloating, just practical logistics. Reminder, Turner House, charity auction this Saturday, 6 p.m. Formal attire. I hit send and walked away from my desk. For the first time since the anniversary, I felt something close to peace. But as the weekend approached and RSVPs started pouring into the house, I got a call from Claire, her voice small, urgent. "Jack, something's wrong," she said. "Dad's been getting calls all morning. People are asking if the party is still on. There's talk. Someone says you're behind the hotel cancellation and the society piece. They're saying the charity is a sham." "Let them talk," I said quietly. "Let them figure it out." She hesitated. "They're panicking. Dad's furious. He says he's going to make this right, whatever it takes." "That won't help them," I said. "He can't buy back respect he never gave." She swallowed. "You realize if he fights back publicly, it could get messy, right? Legal threats, accusations." "I know." The line went quiet for a beat. Then Claire whispered, "Be careful, Jack." I let out a breath that felt like a laugh and promised nothing. I'd set things in motion. Now I was going to watch them try to salvage the life they'd built on narratives and polite smiles. The first domino had fallen. The second was teetering. And just before I closed my laptop that night, one last message popped up on my screen from an unknown number. "You crossed a line. Don't expect us to sit quietly." I stared at it, thumb hovering over the call button, and then the phone rang. When the fallout hit, it didn't come as a single explosion. It came like an avalanche of cracks spreading through the perfect porcelain image my parents had spent decades polishing. It started with whispers. One of my father's golf buddies, someone who prided himself on always knowing the real story, called to ask why the Turner Charity Gala had been listed under my company's brand and not the family's. My father laughed it off at first, said it was a clerical mix-up. But by the second call, he'd realized the sponsors had already moved their donations elsewhere. The Turners' philanthropy legacy had quietly been absorbed by Turner Dynamics Foundation, mine. The social circle they'd built their reputation on turned fast. Invitations dried up. Their names slipped off guest lists. Mom's friends stopped dropping by for afternoon coffee. One by one, the cracks became visible enough that they couldn't hide them anymore. Then came the financial storm. The two investment properties my parents had transferred to Derek, both had been purchased under leveraged loans that depended on a partnership deal. One I dissolved when I restructured the corporate accounts. Overnight, the banks froze the lines of credit. Derek called me, panicked. "Jack, you have to fix this," he said, voice tight with disbelief. "You caused it." "No," I said evenly. "I just stopped cleaning up your messes." He cursed under his breath, then went silent. I didn't hang up. I let him listen to his own breathing until he muttered, "You'll regret this." But I didn't. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the same hotel manager from the anniversary night. They'd canceled the Turners' upcoming business luncheon after learning the original account had been blacklisted for unpaid invoices. Apparently, Derek had tried to book it under a different name and used a corporate number tied to his startup, the one already flagged for fraud. That story made its way into a local business column. Turner Family Ventures faces legal scrutiny. The headline wasn't mine, but I won't pretend I didn't smile when I read it. Meanwhile, Mom tried to play the sympathy card. She called Claire, crying about how I'd ruined the family. Claire told her the truth, that the family had ruined itself long before I ever touched a thing. The final crack came when I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in my father's neat handwriting. Inside was a single check for $200,000, the same amount they'd asked me for months earlier. Attached was a note that read, "We don't need your money. Consider this repayment for the account we helped start your business with. We're even now." It was supposed to sting. It didn't. I deposited the check directly into the Turner Foundation account, the charity branch that now bore my name, and used it to fund scholarships for students who came from families like mine. Controlling, dismissive, polished on the outside and hollow on the inside. News spread fast about the new foundation's first major donation. The article mentioned tech entrepreneur Jack Turner's inspiring story of independence and rebuilding after family estrangement. Mom must have seen it. She didn't call. Neither did Dad. Derek moved to another city within a month. Claire, though, she texted me a photo one night. My parents' house, dark except for one upstairs light. The caption read, "They finally stopped hosting parties." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Good. Maybe they'll finally listen to the silence." A week later, I went back to the hotel, the same one where everything had started. The staff recognized me instantly, treating me like an old friend. The manager asked, smiling nervously, "Planning another event, Mr. Turner?" "Something like that," I said. I booked the smallest room they had, a quiet, intimate space overlooking the city. Not for revenge, not for validation, but for closure. That evening, I sat there alone with a glass of whiskey and the skyline glittering through the windows, replaying the last year like a movie I'd finally walked out of halfway through. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't trying to fix what I didn't break. I lifted my glass, watching the amber catch the light, and said softly to the empty room, "Here's to the family who taught me everything, just not in the way they intended." Then I smiled, finished the drink, and walked out into the night.